Chapter 478. Before becoming an essence soul, Lin Feng's speed in breaking through space and flying was already extremely fast. Now that he has become an essence soul, his speed is even more astonishing. The distance of 10,000 miles, but in the blink of an eye, from Kunlun Mountain to Lin Province in the east of the Great Qin Dynasty, the distance of several 100,000 miles was covered in an instant. After hearing the location of the gathering from the solar luminary sword Venerable, Lin Feng was even more certain of his guess. There was a 90% chance that this gathering was targeted at the Mount Shu sword sect. In terms of geography, the Lin Province and the Shu Province where the Mount Shu sword sect was located were on opposite ends of the Great Qin Dynasty. Although the Nine Heavens Sword Union was mostly united, it was never peaceful internally. Various factions were also trying to stir up trouble. For example, the Sun-Moon Sword sect had always been close to the Great Qin Dynasty. They were also known as the representative of the Great Qin Dynasty in the Nine Heavens Sword Union. As far as Lin Feng knew, the Great Qin Dynasty was not peaceful at the moment. The suppression of the imperial family on the aristocratic families was becoming more and more obvious, and the conflict between the two sides was becoming more and more intense. The conflicts were endless, and the undercurrents were turbulent. Fundamentally speaking, although the aristocratic families were powerful, they could not play tricks with the entire Great Qin Dynasty. However, firstly, the aristocratic families had deep roots, and were one with the Great Qin Dynasty. Their relationship was complicated, and the slightest pull could affect the previous one. Secondly, there were many other major factions who wanted to restrict the Great Qin Dynasty and secretly supported these aristocratic families, preventing the Great Qin Dynasty from acting freely. But from the latest news, the Great Qin Dynasty was determined to act this time. Other than the four aristocratic families, the other small and medium-sized aristocratic families had been dealt a heavy blow. Among the four aristocratic families, there was the He family, which was out of place, but was closer to the imperial family. As a result, the aristocratic families that had been rampant in the Great Qin Dynasty for thousands of years felt like they were in a precarious situation. These people naturally would not wait for death. They all had their own plans. A storm was about to arrive in the Great Qin Dynasty, and the other factions were watching from the side. The imperial family naturally would not allow themselves to be cleaned up while they were surrounded by wolves. They had to prevent others from taking advantage of the situation. This was the result of the gathering before them. Lin Feng arrived near the Tianzhi peak of the Green Caltrop mountain range. After he released his aura of magic power, the Tianzhi peak immediately reacted. A dazzling golden sword light soared into the sky and landed in front of Lin Feng. It turned into a handsome and elegant young man. Sect leader Lin, long time no see. The young man smiled. It was the sect leader of the Sun-Moon Sword sect. Although he had the appearance of a young man, he was already a primordial soul expert who had been famous for thousands of years. The disciples of the Sun-Moon Sword sect could fuse the Solar Glory and Lunar Splendor dual swords together, and the effect of 1 + 1 was far greater than 2. But even if they were fighting alone, the sword cultivators of the Sun-Moon Sword sect were still extremely powerful. The Solar Glory Sword Venerable was a great sword cultivator who looked down on all heroes, and was not the slightest bit weaker than other experts of the same cultivation level. A smile also appeared on Lin Feng's face. "It's my honor to have the luminous sword Venerable personally welcome me." For this gathering, no one brought along their disciples. The Solar Glory Sword Venerable smiled and said, "It's just a few of us old farts gathering in private." Lin Feng nodded and walked side by side with the Solar Glory Sword Venerable. They landed on the Tianzhi peak of the Green Caltrop mountain range below. The Tianzhi peak was the main peak of the southern foothills of the Green Caltrop mountain range. The mountain was long, and there was an obvious crack from halfway up the mountain to the peak in the center. It was like a wheel mark, but it was incomparably huge. It was as if the wheels of a god's chariot had run over it, hence the name Tianjia Peak. When they reached the peak, they saw a middle-aged man in white standing there silently. There was a faint smile on his face as he watched Lin Feng and the solar glory sword venerable walk over together. This person's temperament was extremely special. It constantly fluctuated between extreme hardness and extreme softness, and it was unpredictable. It was like soft drifting snow, but also like an extremely sharp longsword, cold and sharp. As he stood there, it was as if he had formed a world of his own. In that world, wind and snow flew, and he was covered in silver. Upon closer inspection, the falling snowflakes were like boundless icy sword lights that flickered incessantly. If one looked at it for a long time, they would feel that the icy sword lights had already invaded the great thousand worlds, turning the great thousand worlds into snowflake. The solar glory sword venerable introduced. This is the flying snow sword venerable. The middle-aged man in white looked at Lin Feng and his eyes flickered. He smiled and said, "Master of the Celestial Gate, I have long heard of your name." Without the introduction by the solar glory sword venerable, Lin Feng already knew the background of this person just by sensing his sword intent. The flying snow sword venerable was not a big shot of the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance, but a rogue cultivator. He reached the primordial spirit realm alone with a single sword. He was one of the few powerful experts outside of the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance who reached the primordial spirit realm through the sword Tao. Moreover, his cultivation was above that of the solar glory sword venerable. He was a great sword cultivator at the second tier of the primordial spirit realm, refining his spirit to return to the void. In the past, when he was still at the first tier of the primordial spirit realm, he became a super-consecrator of the great Qin Empire. His sword Tao was outstanding, and he was sharp in killing. 1,000 years ago, he was infamous, and he was a sharp sword of the great Qin Empire. In the recent 1,000 years, he gradually disappeared, and there was little news about him. So it turned out that he had gone into seclusion to break through to the second tier of the primordial spirit realm. Now that he had successfully broken through and refined his spirit to return to the void, he had finally come out of seclusion. This great sword cultivator that belonged to the great Qin dynasty had appeared here. The meaning of this gathering was self-evident. Just as I expected. Lin Feng looked at the flying snow sword venerable, and then at the solar glory sword venerable. He knew that his previous guess was correct. The purpose of this gathering was for the Shushan sword sect. I have long heard of the great name of the flying snow sword venerable. After Lin Feng greeted the flying snow sword venerable, he walked forward with the solar glory sword venerable. In the air, there was a slight ripple, and the three of them had already stepped into a miniature alternate dimension. Wind and snow fluttered in the space. This was a miniature sword world space that the host, Flying Snow, had condensed with his spiritual power and sword intent. The moment the solar glory sword venerable entered, Flying Snow laughed. "The moment you entered, my place became unstable." Lin Feng and the solar glory sword venerable smiled when they heard that. The solar glory sword Tao of the solar glory sword Tao transformed into a sword intent that was like sunlight, and it clashed with the sword intent of the flying snow sword Tao. This was because the flying snow sword venerable's cultivation was higher than his. If the two of them were at the same cultivation level, this clash might cause a huge ripple in the sword world. The solar glory sword venerable laughed. "Therefore, 1,000 years ago, I never went to your place as a guest." The flying snow sword venerable laughed when he heard that. Lin Feng looked at them and thought to himself, the two of them probably knew each other when they were still young. I wonder who was the one who influenced who when they got close to the great Qin Empire. After entering the sword world, he saw that there were already people waiting inside. One of the elders turned around and saw the flying snow sword venerable and the solar glory sword venerable accompanying Lin Feng in. He immediately stroked his beard and laughed. "Is this the Xian sect master?" The cultivators here did not conceal their sword intent aura. Lin Feng scanned with his divine sense and felt that this elder's sword intent was like a path to heaven. It overcame all difficulties and cut through brambles and thorns, all the way up to the 9 heavens. His sword intent pierced through the 9 heavens, becoming one with heaven and earth. It was the sword Tao of the Heavenly Sword Sect. The Heavenly Sword Sect was also a part of the 9 Heavens Sword Alliance. Its strength was above the Sun-Moon Sword Sect, Celerita's Sword Sect, and other factions. In the 9 Heavens Sword Alliance, the Heavenly Sword Sect was firmly in second place. The profoundness of the Sword Tao, the number of experts, and the massive faction was second only to the Shushan Sword Sect. In the Heavenly Sword Sect, there were 5 great sword cultivators who had reached the primordial soul realm, and the elder in front of him was at the same realm as Venerable Flying Snow. They had both reached the second tier of the primordial soul realm. Sword Venerable Solar Glory introduced from the side. This is the Heavenly Sword Sect's Elder Immortal Sword. The elder stroked his beard and laughed. The sect master of the Shushan sect is currently in seclusion. He really can't split himself, so I had to make a trip here. I hope that fellow Taoists don't mind. Sword Venerable Flying Snow shook his head and laughed. Elder Immortal Sword coming out of the Heavenly Sword Mountain is even rarer than Sword Venerable Heavenly Sword. We will only welcome you with open arms. Hearing how Sword Venerable Solar Glory and Sword Venerable Flying Snow addressed the elder, Lin Feng was enlightened. He knew who this person was. Elder Immortal Sword, the Heavenly Sword Sect's Supreme Elder. He had cultivated for more than 10,000 years and was extremely senior. The current sect master of the Heavenly Sword Sect was 2 generations younger than him. After Lin Feng greeted Elder Immortal Sword, Sword Venerable Solar Glory introduced him to the other great sword cultivators in the sword world. Oh, interesting. After 1 round, Lin Feng's expression did not change, but he felt that it was interesting. The 9 Heavens Sword Alliance, including the Shushan Sword Sect, was made up of a total of 9 sword sections. And in this gathering, there were as many as 6 members of the 9 Heavens Sword Alliance. Other than the Heavenly Sword Sect and the Sun-Moon Sword Sect, there was also the Thunderbolt Sword Sect, the Constellation Sword Sect, the Vast Sea Sword Sect, and the Celerita's Sword Sect. These 6 sects, together with the Shushan Sword Sect, the Wilderness Sword Sect, and the Blaze Sword Sect, formed the complete 9 Heavens Sword Alliance. Among them, the Sun-Moon Sword Sect had always been on good terms with the Great Qin dynasty, and the Heavenly Sword Sect was the second mountain in the 9 Heavens Sword Alliance other than the Shushan Sword Sect. The Thunderbolt Sword Sect had always been the ally of the Heavenly Sword Sect. This time, there was also a primordial soul realm cultivator participating in the gathering. What was worth noting was that this person was not the sect master, Sword Venerable Thunderbolt, but the newly advanced primordial soul realm expert of the Thunderbolt Sword Sect, Ben Lazy. This surprised the other great sword cultivators. The Thunderbolt Sword Sect was strong to begin with, and the Thunderbolt Sword Venerable was at the second tier of the primordial soul realm. At this moment, there was actually another primordial soul expert in the sect, causing the Thunderbolt Sword Sect's strength to rise a step further. Ben Lazy was originally one of the top Yuanying sword cultivators in the Thunderbolt Sword Sect, and was thought to be one of the most promising candidates to reach the primordial soul realm. For such a joyous event where someone in the sect reached the primordial soul realm, they would usually invite their fellow Taoists to attend and celebrate. Who knew that the Thunderbolt Sword Sect would actually hide the news this time? If not for Ben Lazy attending this gathering, no one would have known that he had actually successfully reached the primordial soul realm. Although the Thunderbolt Sword Venerable had not arrived, Ben Lazy's arrival this time had already expressed the Thunderbolt Sword Sect's attitude. But what made Lin Feng even more interested was that his old acquaintance, the Flowing Light Sword Venerable, was also here. All along in the 9 Heavens Sword Alliance, the Flowing Light Sword Sect and the Blaze Sword Sect were the Shushan Sword Sect's staunchest supporters and followers. Chapter 479. Swordsman Flowing Light was still the same. His face was like jade, his black hair was like a waterfall, and he looked to be in his 40s. 2 strands of snow-white hair hung down from the sides of his temples, and his eyes were full of majesty. He was standing there quietly at this moment. Not only did he attract the attention of Lin Feng, the other great sword cultivators also felt slightly surprised in their hearts. If the Wilderness Sea Council accepted the invitation, then it was normal. But the appearance of the Celeritas swordsman Flowing Light here was obviously a surprise, and it was hard to avoid many speculations. Swordsman Flowing Light himself was calm, and in the process of talking with others, he was calm as usual. Compared to Swordsman Flowing Light, although the arrival of Star Swordsman was also noticed, it was not so eye-catching. Within the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance, Star Swordsman Sect and Wilderness Sword Sect were relatively neutral and also relatively independent. They were not too close to Shu Mountain, but they were not too close to other big powers outside of the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance. However, the Constellation Sword Sect in the past wasn't within the borders of the Grand Qin dynasty, and it had once undergone a great migration before settling down in the territory of the Grand Qin dynasty. In a certain sense, it owed the Grand Qin dynasty a great favor. From this point of view, it was not too surprising that the Star Swordsman sect would lean towards the Great Qin dynasty at a critical moment. Compared to the arrival of Star Swordsman sect, the Songhai Sword sect also came, which attracted Lin Feng's attention, and he could decipher many things from it. Within the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance, the Songhai Sword sect was a bit different, because the location of the Songhai Sword sect was far above the South Sea. Geographically speaking, it was the only large sword sect that was not in the Great Qin dynasty. On the contrary, the Songhai Sword sect was actually within the sphere of influence of the Great Zhou dynasty, so just like how the Sun Moon Sword sect was seen as the representative of the Great Qin dynasty's royal family, the Songhai Sword sect had always been seen as a grain of sand that the Great Zhou dynasty had mixed into the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance. After the Great Zhou dynasty eliminated the power of the aristocratic families and sects, and highly centralized power, the Songhai Sword sect was one of the few large sects that still had a foothold in the Great Zhou dynasty. Due to all these reasons, the Songhai Sword sect had a special position in the Nine Heavens Sword Alliance. It was slightly estranged from the other sword sects, including Mount Shu. Usually, during the alliance meeting, the Songhai Sword sect kept a low profile and did not have much of a presence. However, this did not mean that the Songhai Sword sect was weak. There were many experts in the Songhai Sword sect, and it had always been regarded as the third greatest sword sect in the world, second only to Shu Mountain and Tongtian. The person from the Songhai Sword sect who came this time was a Yuanying cultivator. He was the only one who had not reached the primordial soul realm among the people present. He very humbly expressed that he was here to listen to the decision made by the group of big shots. Any decision would represent the Songhai Sword sect, and he was willing to follow them. Lin Feng looked at this person and thought to himself, is this the attitude of the Great Zhou dynasty? Perhaps Liang Pan, Zhu Hongwu, and the others will not sit by and watch the Qin dynasty clean up its own internal problems to increase its strength, but they have also made their stand against the Mount Shu sword sect. Perhaps they will not interfere personally, but the Songhai sword sect will participate. As far as Lin Feng knew, the relationship between the Great Zhou dynasty and the Mount Shu sword sect was not harmonious. It could only be said that it was passable on the surface. The discord between the two started from the battle of vanquishing Buddhism decades ago. Unlike the Taishu Temple, which only had the support of the Grand Supreme Formation breaking drum, the Mount Shu sword sect had personally taken action, causing the destruction of the Great Tempest Monastery, which was also one of the 3 sacred grounds. In the end, Mount Shu had suffered great losses as well. The lunar sword venerable had died on the spot, and to this day, no one from the lunar sword lineage could advance to the second tier of the primordial soul realm to take over. However, in the end, the gains did not make up for the losses. The great Zhou dynasty rose up by stepping on the ruins of the Great Tempest Monastery, and the fruits of victory were almost all in the hands of the great Zhou dynasty. This made the Mount Shu sword sect extremely dissatisfied. As Lin Feng thought to himself, he chatted with the few great sword cultivators. None of them mentioned anything against Mount Shu. They were simply exchanging their insights on sword Dao and Dao technique. It was as if it was really as Solar Luminary Sword Venerable had said, a gathering of ordinary sword cultivators to exchange pointers on their sword Dao cultivation. To them, as long as they were here, they had already made their stance clear. There was no need to say anything else. Lin Feng did not speak much as he was in the middle. He only displayed a little of the sword intent that he had comprehended from that ferocious sword. However, just this brief display was enough to attract the attention of the great sword cultivators. However, after that, Lin Feng did not display it anymore, leaving the great sword cultivators at the primordial soul realm unable to hold back their curiosity. Lin Feng's sword intent seemed to have revealed a brand new world to them, a brand new path. Sect Leader Lin, may I have a word with you? Sword Venerable Flying Snow was also very tempted by the sword intent that Lin Feng displayed. However, he quickly suppressed his restless sword heart and said solemnly, His Majesty, Emperor Qin, has something that requires Sect Leader Lin's help. Lin Feng took a glance at Sword Venerable Flying Snow and nodded slightly. The sword world that everyone was currently in was formed from Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow's magic power and sword intent. With a thought, Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow had already broken through the void with Lin Feng and arrived at another alternate dimension. When the other big shots saw this, their expressions remained unchanged. They were just guessing why Emperor Qin Stonefeather was looking for Lin Feng. Ben Lazy and Old Sword Immortal looked at each other. The same thought flashed in their eyes. I'm afraid it has something to do with the sword Dao of the Master of Xianmen. Flying Snow confirmed the authenticity and uniqueness of his sword Dao before making the invitation. If the news of the Master of Xianmen's sword Dao being profound wasn't true, this might not have happened. Lin Feng had also thought of this point. Therefore, when he arrived in the void with Sword Venerable Flying Snow, he silently looked at Sword Venerable Flying Snow. Using his finger as a sword, Sword Venerable Flying Snow drew a circle of light in the air. Within the circle of light a figure appeared. It was a middle-aged man wearing a crown and dragon robe. He was overflowing with the aura of an emperor. He was Emperor Qin Stonefeather. Stonefeather looked at Lin Feng and nodded. Sect Master Lin, I have a presumptuous request this time. I hope that you can help me. Lin Feng's expression was calm. He said indifferently, Dao friend, please speak. The light and shadow in front of him changed. Suddenly, a black fog spread out. Within the black fog, there was a vague five-colored radiance shooting out. Within the five-colored radiance, a true dragon could be seen roaming. Its dragon might was astonishing. Within the five-colored radiance of white, green, black, scarlet, and yellow, there seemed to be a long light shadow that could not be seen clearly. Lin Feng's brows twitched slightly. Even though he could not see the true appearance of the light shadow, Lin Feng could sense that this object was extremely huge. It was not accurate to say that it was huge. Its total volume was indeed huge, but in terms of appearance it was mainly long. It was extremely long, so long that it was hard to imagine. Even with Lin Feng's perception after attaining the essence soul realm, it was still a little hard to describe. This was because he could vaguely sense that this object's length was probably hundreds of thousands of kilometers, or even millions of kilometers. Such a length could not be described with the general meaning of length. This was because it was very difficult to use something that was similar to the length as an analogy. Looks like the news is not false. This should be the Great Qin dynasty's trump card, their national treasure. Lin Feng understood. He had previously received news that in order to deal with the increasingly turbulent situation, the Great Qin dynasty was preparing to refine their own national treasure. This treasure had actually existed a long time ago. Like the Great Zhou dynasty's grand imperial palace, it was a primordial inheritance. However, at that time, it had not been completely refined. It was an incomplete product. Afterward, it landed in the hands of the Great Qin dynasty, and the imperial family had always hoped to refine it completely. However, this treasure could be said to have been plagued with mishaps, and they had never been able to completely refine it. In the most recent war between the human race and the demon race, it had suffered severe damage. But looking at it now, in these thousands of years, the imperial family of the Great Qin dynasty had always been preparing in secret. As they repaired the damage, they also hoped to completely refine this treasure. The reason why the imperial family of the Great Qin dynasty had been low profile and weak in recent years was very likely because they had invested too many resources into this treasure. It was still an incomplete product, but through the void, Lin Feng could faintly feel the powerful concept of power of this treasure. It was filled with a supreme aura that was insurmountable, indestructible, and could suppress all the worlds in the world. It had an inextinguishable fate. No wonder Liang Pan and Zhu Hongwu were so anxious, spending so much effort to seize Yudu Minghua. If the Grand Imperial Palace doesn't continue to improve, when this treasure is completely refined, they probably won't be a match for it. Silently, Lin Feng looked at the shadow in the black fog and didn't say a word. Sword Venerable Flying Snow stood beside him and looked at the shadow with admiration in his eyes. Suddenly, a hint of darkness flashed past his eyes. "Excuse me for a moment," Sword Venerable Flying Snow said. The voice of Qin Emperor Stone Feather came from the other side of the shadow. "Flying Snow, go handle it yourself." Sword Venerable Flying Snow nodded at Lin Feng and stepped into the void to leave this space. Stone Feather's voice came over. "I have troubled Sect Master Lin to come over this time because I want to ask Sect Master Lin to make a move." Silently, Lin Feng said, "Make a move?" "That's right." Stone Feather said, "Truth be told, what is placed before Sect Master Lin now is the supreme magic treasure of my Great Qin that can suppress the karmic luck of a nation. In the past, my Great Qin relied on this treasure to obtain the nation. It's a pity that the road to happiness is strewn with setbacks. This treasure has never been truly refined until today. Finally, there's some improvement." Lin Feng's tone was indifferent. "The heavenly Tao is balanced. After thousands of trials and tribulations, once it appears in the world, it will surpass countless mortals. I should congratulate fellow Taoists. Thank you for your blessings, Sect Master Lin." Stone Feather continued, "I heard Imperial Uncle Zhong Yu and Xing Do mention that Sect Master Lin has the Supreme Sword Tao and has the intent to destroy the world. Therefore, this time, I specially ask Sect Master Lin to make a move and help my Great Qin to make this treasure appear in the world." At this moment, Lin Feng already completely understood Stone Feather's thoughts. This person wanted to borrow the sword intent of Lin Feng's peerless ominous sword to stimulate this supreme treasure of the Great Qin dynasty and make it completely mature. Although this treasure was powerful, Lin Feng could sense that this was actually a treasure that was stronger in defense than offense. Not only was its defense powerful, but it also had the powerful intent of protecting everything and protecting all things in the world. My body is indestructible, and I should protect all things for eternity. Creation will not suffer from tribulations. Meanwhile, that ominous sword on Jade Capital Mountain just happened to be the opposite of it. It had the great destruction sword intent that could destroy everything in the world and slay creation. When it was attacked by the ominous sword, this treasure would stimulate all of its potential and thus reach its peak state. Of course, if it could not withstand it, then it would be completely destroyed by the ominous sword. However, if Lin Feng could freely control this sword, then the result would definitely be within a controllable range. Stone Feather said slowly, Sect Master Lin, please be generous in your assistance. My great Qin will definitely repay you generously. Chapter 480. As the ruler of a country, if Stonefeather said that there would be a generous reward, then it would naturally not be too shabby. However, even if the Qin dynasty did not give a reward, Lin Feng would still agree after putting on a show. It was very simple. The Qin dynasty wanted to use the ominous sword to form a blood bond with a magical treasure, and was that not the perfect whetstone for the ominous sword? The two sides were completely opposite in power. Lin Feng believed that this supreme magical treasure of the Qin dynasty was probably the best thing in the entire heaven primordial world for tempering the ominous sword besides the Shushan immortal sword Qi. Before, even though he had heard that the great Qin dynasty had such a treasure, but he had never actually seen it before and did not know its details. Now that he has clearly understood the concept of power contained within it, there is no way that Lin Feng would let go of such a perfect whetstone. As for the fact that the Qin dynasty's strength would soar after successfully forming a blood bond with such a treasure, and that it might become a potential enemy, Lin Feng believed that when the heaven-punishing sword was completely unsheathed and could be effectively controlled, his strength would grow even more terrifyingly. However, it was definitely not possible now. Lin Feng could feel that this magical treasure was not yet complete. The unbreakable and unbreakable protector concept of all to eternity was not complete. If not for this, it would not have been damaged during the war between the two worlds. Stonefeather also understood this. Today, he had only communicated with Lin Feng, and the two sides had come to an agreement. When I passed by Western Tomb City, you could have suggested this. Why wait until today? Lin Feng asked nonchalantly. Stonefeather said silently, back then, some things were not ready, so I did not mention it easily. But today, there's no harm in mentioning it. As he said this, a powerful wave of power passed through the void. Lin Feng's pupils constricted slightly. He saw a ball of golden light land before him. The golden light itself contained powerful spiritual power, and its purpose was to seal the thing within. Within the light was an independent lesser world. The starry sky was resplendent, and in the center of the galaxy, there was a true dragon. It was a primordial sky dragon with an extremely pure bloodline. Its body was close to 10,000 zhang long, and it was extremely powerful and huge. The majestic power of blood and qi emanating from it shook the universe. This was a primordial sky dragon that had attained the indestructible demon's soul realm. Lin Feng scanned it and discovered that the primordial sky dragon was already dead. The pocket world of light stored its corpse. However, even though he was already dead, his corpse still emanated boundless power, and there were even great auspicious clouds floating around his body, exuding a heavy and dignified aura. Slowly, Qin Emperor Stonefeather said, "This is my great Qin's gift to sect leader Lin. This is just a token of appreciation. We will reward you when the time comes." How extravagant! Lin Feng thought to himself, the corpse of a primordial sky dragon is filled with treasures after its death. This entire sky dragon slew is indeed quite a hefty reward. A sky dragon corpse was nothing. A pure-blooded primordial sky dragon corpse was nothing either. However, a pure-blooded primordial sky dragon's corpse that had attained the indestructible demon's soul realm and was extremely complete, with not a single dragon scale missing, was extremely valuable. Although the dark solitary skeleton that Lin Feng obtained in the Cloud Forest world was complete, it was only a skeleton. This sky dragon corpse before him had dragon scales, dragon bones, dragon blood, dragon flesh, dragon tendons, etc., all of it was complete. As the number one dynasty of the human race in the divine land in the past, the great Qin dynasty's foundation was on full display at this moment. Just the deposit given to Lin Feng was an entire primordial sky dragon corpse that had attained the indestructible demon soul realm. Then, the resources they invested into that super Dharma treasure was imaginable. Lin Feng did not stand on ceremony either. With a flick of his sleeves, he directly swept up the golden ball of light and put it away. On the other side of the space, although Qin Emperor Stonefeather's expression did not change, his heart stirred slightly. He felt that his dermic powers were instantly dispelled into nothingness by Lin Feng. He did not have any enmity. His dermic powers turned into golden light and was only used to temporarily seal the sky dragon corpse. It did not have much power. However, for Lin Feng to dispel it so effortlessly, it still made him have a better understanding of Lin Feng's strength. After Lin Feng put away the sky dragon corpse, he said indifferently, "This seat agrees to this matter. It's just that looking at this Dharma treasure of yours, it's still some distance from the final step." Stonefeather answered frankly, "That's right. It still needs some time, but it's already right in front of us. At that time, I'll have to ask Sect Master Lin to make a move." Lin Feng stared at the illusion of light and shadow in front of him. His gaze passed through the layers of black mist and stopped on the image of the Dharma treasure that flashed with 5-colored light. "Oh, I can indeed faintly sense the profoundness of the 9 glorious stars movement. When this Dharma treasure is fully activated, it can probably draw in the endless star power of the 9 glorious stars into its body as its driving force. This should be the result of Stonefeather refining a portion of the 9 glorious sky crumbling formation diagram into this Dharma treasure." As Lin Feng was analyzing this super Dharma treasure of the great Qin dynasty, Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow returned to the Sword World at the peak of the Green Caltrip mountain range. The moment he arrived, he immediately realized that the situation was extremely tense. With Old Sword Immortal as the leader, a group of great sword cultivators stood together silently, facing off against another group of people in front of them. The person leading the other party was tall and burly, and he had an imposing aura. Just by standing there, he was like a huge sword that wanted to split the heaven and earth, extremely domineering and fierce. Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow took a deep breath. "Venerable Little Shang." This person was the sword master of the Shaoshang sword lineage, the fiercest of the 6 lineages of Shushan sword sect, Venerable Little Shang. Beside him, there were 3 other great sword cultivators whose auras were in no way inferior to his. They stood there calmly. One of them had an elegant bearing and wore a smile on his face, but no one dared to belittle him. Clearly, he was standing there, but everyone present, including Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow, could not determine his true position. It was as if he was standing in many layers of time and space, representing countless possibilities and drifting about. Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow was expressionless. "Even Venerable Little Swordsman is here?" Venerable Little Swordsman was the Sword Master Grandmaster of the 6 lineages of Shushan sword lineage. Venerable Little Swordsman was the most agile and nimble of the 6 lineages of Shushan sword lineage, and was even hailed as the fastest sword Dao in the Divine Land. Its evaluation was even above the Celeritas sword sect's instant sword escape and the Heavenly sword sect's heavenly sword escape. Venerable Little Swordsman was one of the few mystical abilities in the Divine Land that could allow cultivators below the Yuanying stage to traverse through space and assassinate. Most people thought that Shushan Little Swordsman was traversing through space and assassinating, while Celerita's sword sect's instant sword escape was infused with the profound concept of time. But that was for sword cultivators who had yet to form their primordial spirit. On Venerable Little Swordsman, who was already at the 2nd level of the primordial spirit realm, it was infused with the profound concepts of time and space, pushing Venerable Little Swordsman to the extreme. Beside the junior sword Venerable was an old man with a simple and solemn face. His eyes were dull, and he seemed like a stubborn rock. It seemed as if nothing could arouse his interest, but at the same time, nothing could make him waver. It was Venerable Guanchong, who Lin Feng had met once before. After experiencing the calamity of the cloudy forest realm, Venerable Guanchong had also recuperated in Shushan for a long time. Until now, his vitality had not completely recovered, but this time, he still rushed over. On the other side of Venerable Guanchong was a middle-aged man dressed in hemp clothes, barefooted. The essence, spirit, and spirit of the Shushan sword cultivators were completely exposed, not concealed at all. The higher one's cultivation, the more it was so. The only exception was this hemp-clothed man. He did not emit any sword intent or spiritual power aura at all. He stood there normally, as if he was a mortal in the secular world. But the person Venerable Flying Snow and the others feared the most was this person. The sword master of Shushan's Li Meng sword lineage. Li Meng sword lineage. Among Shushan's 6 lineages sword lineage, Li Meng sword lineage was the most vicious and vicious. It had the most murderous and vicious aura. Its disciples were all numb to killing, and Venerable Fierce sword lineage himself was the great sword cultivator who killed the most in the entire Shushan. Ancient Killing God Sect, Southern Border Hua Clan, Reincarnation Sect, and Azura Path did not dare to boast about killing in front of Li Meng sword lineage. Venerable Fierce sword lineage looked at Venerable Flying Snow calmly, and said expressionlessly, "Flying Snow, long time no see. You have finally refined your spirit to return to the void." Venerable Flying Snow was similarly expressionless. He only felt a tearing pain in the depths of his primordial spirit. That pain was not real, but it was deeply imprinted in the memories of Venerable Flying Snow's consciousness. 2,000 years ago, Venerable Flying Snow, who was still at the first tier of the primordial spirit realm, had once fought with Venerable Fierce sword lineage. In the end, he was defeated by the other party's sword, and was even nearly killed on the spot. Even though Old Sword Immortal and the others looked calm, their gazes had turned solemn. Shushan's 6 pulse swords, the 6 great sword masters, were all at the second tier of the primordial spirit realm, great sword cultivators at the void return realm. Other than Venerable Lunar Sword, who had died in battle at the great Thunderclap Monastery, and Venerable Xiaoyang, who had stayed in Shushan after Sect Master Xan Longxing went into seclusion, the other 4 were all present. Other than these 4 great sword cultivators at the second tier of the primordial spirit realm, Shushan also had a few experts at the first tier of the primordial spirit realm present. Even though this gathering, which was led by Venerable Flying Snow and Venerable Brilliant Sword Sage, did not state it explicitly, it was obvious that it was targeted at Shushan. But when Venerable Xiaoshang and the others arrived, the others immediately felt the strength and overbearing dominance of Shushan. This was a colossus that required the other 8 members of the 9 Heavens Sword Union to join forces in order to barely resist. It was a powerful sect that even the entire Great Qin dynasty would have to use all their strength to resist. It was the #1 sword Dao sect in the world, alongside the Taishu Temple and the Great Thunderclap Monastery, as one of the 3 sacred grounds of the human cultivation world. The tall and burly Venerable Xiaoshang laughed boldly and said, "We have come uninvited, so please forgive us. It's just that, 4 fellow sword cultivators to gather here today. I wonder if there's something big happening?" Venerable Brilliant Sword Sage said calmly, "What big thing can there be? It's just a group of fellow sword cultivators having an exchange of sword Dao and learning from each other." Venerable Xiaoshang smiled slightly and said, "Oh? Then we can be considered to be coincidentally here, so let's join in the fun. I believe fellow Taoists won't mind." Before Venerable Flying Snow and Venerable Brilliant Sword Sage said anything, Venerable Xiaoshang laughed loudly. "What's there to mind? Thousands of swords in the world come out of Shushan, and this is a Sword Dao alliance. How can it be proper without Shushan?" The moment he said that, the expressions of Old Sword Immortal, Venerable Flying Snow, Ben Lazy, Venerable Star Constellation, and the others changed. who knew that Venerable Shaoshang's character was just as overbearing as his Shaoshang sword. He did not leave any leeway for others and said, "We sword cultivators are decisive in killing, so we should make friends with our swords. An exchange of the way of the sword is not something that can be achieved through words alone. Let's have a real spar." He glanced sideways at Venerable Flying Snow and the others and laughed. "My Shushan will be the arena master. Who wants to fight with us?" As he said that, an overbearing sword chi rushed into the sky and directly slashed through the sword world that Venerable Flying Snow had set up. Chapter 481. As Sword Venerable Little Shang laughed out loud, a domineering and ferocious sword chi soared into the sky. It actually caused a crack to appear in the small world formed by Sword Venerable Flying Snow's sword intent and magic power. Amidst the flying snow, a crack suddenly appeared in the sky. It was as if a wound had appeared in this small world. It was mournful and dazzling. Venerable Flying Snow's expression turned ashen. The wind and snow within the sword world continued to howl, instantly turning berserk. However, they did not attack Venerable Little Shang. Even if the wind and snow blew past revered swordsman of Little Shang, it had no intention of attacking him. This was because Sword Venerable Li Meng, who looked like an ordinary person, had his sword intent firmly locked onto Sword Venerable Flying Snow, causing Sword Venerable Li Meng to not dare to be distracted at all. Everyone knew that Sword Venerable Li Meng didn't use his weapon, but once he did, he would definitely kill. Li Xiong of Mount Shu only needed one sword to kill. Usually, when he hid thousands of sword chis in his body, he had to endure the endless pain of being cut by thousands of blades. Before hurting the enemy, he would hurt himself first. However, in the instant that he drew his sword, all of his sword will and dermic powers burst forth. The swift and fierce attack that targeted a single point of attack could be said to be the best among the 6 lineages of Shushan. Honorable Swordsman Li said calmly, "The Swordsman Li of Shushan never leaves anyone alive. Flying Snow, in the past, when you and I were both at the first level of the primordial spirit realm, you managed to survive a single strike from me. I have always been looking for an opportunity to fight with you again." At this point, Sword Supremacy Li Meng suddenly laughed. "But after I refined my spirit to revert to the void, killing you, who was only at the first tier of the primordial soul realm, was really boring. Over the past 1,000 years, I've been waiting for you to attain the second tier of the primordial soul realm. Let us see the outcome of our unfinished battle 2,000 years ago today." Hearing that, Sword Venerable Flying Snow turned silent. Slowly, he closed his eyes. The sword world formed from his magic power and sword intent suddenly melted away. Everyone found themselves in the void. Venerable Sword Flying Snow reopened his eyes and looked at Venerable Sword Li Meng calmly. "Please." As he said this, a faintly discernible sword will spread out from his body and collided with the ominous swordsman's aura, which was about to explode. On the Shushan side, the junior sword lord, who had the mildest temperament, cast his gaze towards the heavenly sword sex Elder Sword Immortal. He smiled faintly and said, "Elder Sword Immortal, you should be enjoying your fortune on the heavenly mountain. Why did you come all the way here?" Although his tone was gentle, the fact that he had spoken made Sun Luminary Sword Venerable and the others shudder. They knew that this Sword Master Grandmaster of Lesser Rule Swords was about to make a move as well. Old Sword Immortal stroked his beard and smiled. "I'm just a bag of old bones, so I have to move them. Otherwise they will really rust." Junior Sword Venerate shook his head and laughed. "Since that's the case, since it's rare for you to come out of the sky-piercing mountain, I naturally have to seize the opportunity to spar with you. Otherwise, I don't know when the next time will be." Old Sword Immortal, who had white hair and a ruddy complexion, did not have the slightest hesitation. He said straightforwardly, "Of course. Your esteemed Sex Shaoza Sword Artifact, my Heavenly Path Sword Sex Great Tao Heavenly Path Sword, plus the Cellerita's sword sect's instant sword escape are publicly acknowledged as the 3 fastest sword Dao abilities in the vast divine continent. Today, this old man will compete with Shaoza's sword Venerable to see who is faster. Junior Sword Venerate glanced at Cellerita's sword Venerate at the side, smiling faintly. This matter has long been publicly agreed upon. Let's verify it today. At the side, Junior Sword Venerate was also staring at Cellerita's sword Venerate, continuously shaking his head. Old friend, why are you doing this? The two of them had been friends for many years. Back then, when Junior Sword Venerate ascended the cloud-traversing peak, he even left behind a sword mark that contained the sword intent of his junior rule swords. By observing this sword mark, others could more or less understand some of the mysteries of the junior rule swords. The Cellerita's sword sect also participating in this alliance meeting against Shushan was out of the expectations of many people. Cellerita's sword Venerate stood with his hands behind his back, his expression calm. Why ask when you already know the answer? The smile on Junior Sword Venerate's face gradually disappeared. He was also silent. Only after a long while did he lightly sigh. Ever since you took over the Cellerita's sword sect, you have been increasingly alienated from my Shushan. I was also forced to do so. Silently Sword Venerate Flowing Light said, What you said is right, but at that time I had no enmity towards Shushan. I only hoped that the Cellerita's sword sect could walk its own path and not always be under the shadow of Shushan, following them around like a servant. The Blaze Sword sect is happy to walk this path, I am not. Cellerita's sword Venerate Flowing Light's tone was calm from beginning to end. But I never thought that Shushan would be so overbearing, to actually be unable to even tolerate this little request of my Cellerita's sword sect? When Cellerita's sword Venerate Sunlight and the others heard this, their faces all revealed a thoughtful expression, thinking in their hearts. Junior Sword Venerate Flowing Light left a sword mark for the Cellerita's sword sect. On the surface it seems to be friendship, but thinking deeper, I'm afraid it doesn't have any good intentions. Junior Sword Venerate Flowing Light snorted. Aren't you still going to rely on the Qin dynasty right now? Open your eyes and see clearly, no matter if it's the Qin dynasty or the Great Zhou dynasty, the thorns in their eyes are not only the aristocratic powers, but also the major sections. Cellerita's sword Venerate Flowing Light nodded his head, glancing at Cellerita's Flying Snow, who was facing off with someone, and Cellerita's sword Venerate Sunlight, who was beside him. He said with emotion, What you said is right, so no matter what, we have to thank the existence of Shushan. Even if they are grateful, they will not continue to walk together with Shushan, gradually becoming a vassal of Shushan. And it is precisely because of the pressure brought by Shushan that even if the sky falls, there is this big guy to hold it up. The Qin dynasty instead does not dare to make things difficult for the Cellerita's sword sect, and even more enthusiastically tries to win them over and give preferential treatment. This already has nothing to do with personal friendship. It is completely a choice made by the person at the helm of a large sect that is most in line with the interests of his own sect. At the very beginning, Cellerita's sword Venerate Flowing Light did not want his sect to become a vassal of Shushan. His original plan was perhaps only to adjust the Cellerita's sword sect's general policy, turning it into a middle ground like the Constellation sword sect and the Wilderness sword sect. But the Shushan sword sect's response, using Cellerita's sword Venerate Little Shang to scheme against Cellerita's sword Venerate Flowing Light, enraged this great sword cultivator, making him change his mind and choose to lean towards the Qin dynasty. Cellerita's sword sect definitely does not wish for Shushan to be destroyed. If that happens, it will be hard to avoid the result of the dogs being cooked when the hares are dead. But he is clearly very willing for Shushan to be taught a lesson, making Shushan restrain its overbearing style. Cellerita's sword Venerate Little Shang is expressionless. So, at the lakeside of the North Wind Sea, you deliberately lost the sword scar inscription I left for you to the master of Xiangate? Shu Shan's sword Venerate Little Shang is truly extraordinary. Even knowing that it will block my path of advancement, it still deeply attracts me. Celerita's sword Venerate Flowing Light sighed, but it is also because I gave up your sword scar inscription that I finally walked back on the right track. Just as he was speaking, Celerita's sword Venerate Flowing Light's body suddenly emitted a dazzling brilliance, transforming into a ray of light, flickering in the air, its whereabouts uncertain. This was the primordial spirit avatar that Celerita's sword Venerate Little Shang had cultivated, the instantaneous flowing light sword Tao. At this moment, he manifested his primordial spirit avatar not to fight Celerita's sword Venerate Little Shang, but to break through the bottleneck and advance to the second tier of the primordial spirit realm, the realm of refining the spirit to return to the void. In front of all the great sword cultivators, he had attained the second tier of the primordial spirit realm. Celerita's sword Venerate Little Shang's expression was solemn, but he did not stop Celerita's sword Venerate Flowing Light's actions. The ray of light formed by Celerita's sword Venerate Flowing Light's primordial spirit was originally flickering, but at this moment it suddenly became clear. It streaked across the void and did not dissipate for a long time, gradually forming the outline of a figure. It was in the shape of a longsword. It did not have a physical body, only a silhouette formed by the light. However, it exuded an elusive and powerful intent of power. It was like a fleeting stream of light. That instant was so short that it flashed by in a hurry, difficult to grasp or capture. This longsword was like an independent world, floating outside the void of the heaven primordial world. Within the longsword, there were countless lights and shadows changing. In the time it took to snap a finger, it changed 60 times. Each light and shadow was a different image. When Celerita's sword Venerate saw this scene, he silently said, "Congratulations, fellow Taoist." Old Sword Immortal, Ben Lazy, Astral Constellation Sword Venerate and the others also said in unison, "Congratulations, fellow Taoist." Even Sword Venerate Little Shang sighed, "Old friend, congratulations." The group of primordial spirit experts congratulated him in unison. They congratulated Celerita's sword Venerate Flowing Light for successfully refining his spirit to return to the void, condensing his own void-returning Dharma body, and advancing to the second tier of the primordial spirit realm. Even Sword Venerate Little Shang gave up on Old Sword Immortal. He looked over and said with a smile, "If I remember correctly, this is the 5th cultivator in the entire Celerita's sword sex history to refine his spirit to return to the void, right? In my lifetime, I have yet to spar with a second-tier primordial spirit realm cultivator from the Celerita's sword sect. Today, let me witness a void-returning realm cultivator's instantaneous sword escape." Sword Venerate Little Shang shook his head. "He is mine." As he said this, a majestic and domineering sword intent soared into the sky, shaking the entire void. Its target was Sword Venerate Flowing Light. Sword Venerate Flowing Light dispersed his void-returning Dharma body and regained his human form. The sharp and ethereal sword intent similarly aimed at Sword Venerate Little Shang. Sword Venerate Little Shang chuckled lightly, not getting angry. He turned to look at the heavenly sword sex Old Sword Immortal and said with a smile, "I was just curious." "Old Sword Immortal, please don't blame me." Old Sword Immortal said indifferently, "How could that be? Even this old man has sparred with a void-returning realm cultivator from the Celerita's sword sect. It has already been several thousand years. Seeing it today, I am also a little moved." Sword Venerate Little Shang smiled faintly and did not say anything else. His figure flashed and his sword intent surged, instantly seeming to transform into several tens of himself. This was not the shadow clone technique, but rather Sword Venerate Little Shang pushing his sword Tao cultivation to the extreme. His primordial spirit escaped into many layers of space and time. It was the same logic as Lin Feng using Jade Capital Mountain to manifest many possibilities of time in the cloudy forest world. Seeing this, Old Sword Immortal also displayed his own great Tao heavenly sword technique. His body transformed into endless sword light, his aura surging like a bull. He instantly traversed through endless space and clashed with Sword Venerate Little Shang. At the same time, Sword Venerate Little Shang and Sword Venerate Flowing Light, Sword Venerate Fierce Li and Sword Venerate Flying Snow also began their respective battles. Although Sword Venerate Flying Snow dispersed his sword realm, the group of primordial spirit bigshots still remained in the void. They did not return to the great Thousand Worlds Divine Lands Green Caltrop mountain ranges Tianjia Peak. With so many great sword cultivators proficient in killing engaging in a chaotic battle, it was impossible to destroy the Divine Land as a whole. However, completely destroying the great Qin dynasty's Lin province and the entire Green Caltrop mountain range was no suspense. Only by using the void as a battlefield could a battle of this level be accommodated. And in another alternate dimension, Lin Feng also felt the commotion. His gaze narrowed slightly. Looks like there are uninvited guests. Chapter 482. Honorable Swordsman Guan Chong had experienced the calamity of the cloudy forest realm and had yet to recover, so he could only stand by the side to guard the other three sword masters. But no matter how low-key he was still a sword cultivator who had refined his spirit to the void. As long as he stood there, he would be a deterrent, making others not dare to act rashly. Although the great Qin dynasty did not make it clear that the gathering was organized this time, it was actually targeted at Shushan. They wanted to cause some trouble for Shushan within the Nine Heavens Sword Union. The Shushan sword sect naturally would not sit idly by when they heard the news. In the end, 4 Void Reversion Realm sword masters attacked together. Apart from them, there were also Honorable Swordsman Ning Lang and a group of first-tier Primordial Spirit Realm sword cultivators. Shushan was deliberately establishing their might this time. The number of experts present was impressively more than all the sword cultivators attending the gathering combined, and they were even stronger. Honorable Swordsman Tong Tian, Honorable Swordsman Thunderbolt, Honorable Swordsman Vast Sea, and some second-tier primordial spirit realm experts of the great Qin dynasty did not come, causing an awkward scene at the gathering. Shushan, with the power of one sect, completely crushed the alliance of the other factions. Even if Honorable Swordsman Streamlight successfully broke through on the front lines, they only had 3 second-tier primordial spirit realm experts on their side. Coincidentally, Shushan Sword Sect's strong attack this time was also very targeted, specifically targeting the Heavenly Sword Sect, the Great Qin Dynasty, and the Celeritas Sword Sect. As the second strongest sword sect in the Nine Heavens Sword League, the Heavenly Sword Sect was naturally the focus of Shushan Sword Sect's suppression. They wanted to teach them who was the absolute boss of the Nine Heavens Sword League, and who was the #1 sword holy land in the world. The Great Qin Dynasty was the instigator of this gathering targeting Shushan. The main culprit would definitely not let him off. Sword Honorable Li Xiong was really determined to kill this time. He wanted to kill Sword Honorable Flying Snow here and teach the Great Qin Dynasty a lesson. Celerita's sword sect appeared as traitors, and would not be let off either. As for the Sun Moon Sword Sect, which was a vassal of Great Qin, and the Thunderclap Sword Sect, which was a vassal of the Heavenly Sword Sect, the Constellation Sword Sect, which had always been neutral, and the Songhai Sword Sect, which was connected to the Great Zhou Dynasty, mainly acted as a deterrent. In the endless void, the concept of distance seemed to have been lost. Countless sword lights flashed in the space, and the sky and earth were turned upside down. Old Immortal Sword, Sword Venerable Flying Snow, and Sword Venerable Streamlight were experts that had attained the second tier of the Essence Soul Realm. Old Immortal Sword, in particular, had already attained the Tao 10,000 years ago. His great Tao leads to the heavenly sword had been cultivated to the point of perfection. But at this moment, the three of them were facing the three great sword masters of the Mount Shu sword sect, and they were all at a disadvantage. Sword Venerable Solar Luminary and the others frowned as they watched. Ben Lazy's expression was gloomy as he stared at Old Sword Immortal and Junior Sword Venerable. In the Mount Shu sword sect's camp, a man in brocade clothes with a hooked nose looked at Ben Lazy calmly. "Why? Do you also want to come down and exchange swordsmanship? If you have this intention, I, Ning, will accept it." The Thunderbolt sword sect's sword Dao has always been regarded as the most ferocious sword Dao mystique apart from Mount Shu's Shaoshang sword. You seem to have recently attained the primordial spirit. I can help you test its quality. The person who spoke was Sword Venerable of Broken Mountain, Ning Lang. The way of the sword that he practiced was the Shaoshang sword. Although his tone was calm, it caused Ben Lazy's expression to change slightly. Ning Lang glanced at Ben Lazy and said silently, "Do you have any objections? All the swords in the world come from Mount Shu. In the past, the founding ancestor of your Thunderbolt sword sect personally came to Mount Shu's Shaoshang Peak to seek guidance. Why? Don't the people of the Thunderbolt sword sect know about it?" As though it was a footnote to Ning Lang's words, an extremely resplendent and vigorous sword light pierced through the heavens and earth in the void, erupting with a powerful energy that made everyone's heart tremble. Accompanying this sharp and ruthless sword light with spiritual energy, snowflakes suddenly fell from the endless void. Upon closer inspection, those snowflakes were actually condensed by Sword Venerable Flying Snow's sword will. But at this moment, the sword will was gradually dissipating. As the snowflakes fell, they constantly disintegrated and eventually disappeared without a trace. In the beginning, there were only a few snowflakes, but as time went on, they seemed to be endless. But no matter how many snowflakes there were, they could only end up with dust on the ground. This was the sword will condensed by Sword Venerable Flying Snow, but it was actually destroyed by someone at its core. It lost its original strength and concept, and eventually became rotten. In the void, a large amount of snowflakes gathered to form a white-robed middle-aged man. He was Sword Venerable Flying Snow. Even though his appearance did not change much, everyone present was an expert who had cultivated the sword Dao for thousands of years. They could tell that Sword Venerable Flying Snow had lost. At this moment, even though Sword Venerable Flying Snow's appearance did not change, his temperament seemed to have changed from a peerless divine sword that radiated with cold light to a rusty, empty shell of a piece of scrap metal. Sword Venerable Flying Snow looked at Sword Venerable Li Meng, who was slowly walking out of the dark space, and muttered to himself, 2,000 years of bitter cultivation is still not enough? Sword Venerable Sunlight and the others fell silent. Looking at Sword Venerable Li Meng, who seemed to have turned back into an ordinary person, they all felt their hearts sink. Most sword cultivators did not practice spiritual techniques or refine immortal treasures. They only used their longswords to battle the world. Even primordial spirit experts only used their swords and did not rely on external objects. This was because their attacks were sharp and they were especially ferocious in fight. Their actual combat ability was usually outstanding among cultivators of the same realm. And Shushan sword sect was even more so a model. Their name was praised throughout the ages. There had always been a private saying in the heaven primordial world that Shushan cultivators are one level higher. This meant that in actual combat, any Shushan sword cultivator could fight against other cultivators that were at least one small realm higher. The three tiers of the primordial spirit stage were primordial spirit incarnation, refined spirit to void, and void fusion. They were different from the early, middle, and late stages of the Yuanying stage, or the early, middle, and late stages of the Golden Elixir period and Foundation establishment stage. The difference between each tier was much greater. The difference in strength might not be an insurmountable chasm, but in terms of cultivation difficulty, The three primordial spirit stage were basically equivalent to the difference between three major realms. And among the Shushan cultivators, there had once been someone who proudly claimed that Shushan first-tier primordial spirit stage sword cultivators could fight against second-tier primordial spirit stage cultivators from other sections. Shushan refined spirit to void cultivators could fight against void fusion cultivators from other sections. This saying had never been publicly acknowledged by the Shushan sword sect, nor had it been verified. However, there would be no smoke without fire. The existence of such a rumor proved the strength of the Shushan sword Dao. The scene before them seemed to prove this point. Venerable swordsman Fluttering Snow, who was also at the second-tier primordial spirit stage, was defeated by venerable swordsman Li Meng without a chance to retaliate. This scene seemed to serve as a warning to venerable solar luminary and the others. What kind of colossus were they trying to fight against? Looking at the other two battles, it was even more chilling. Venerable swordsman Little Shang's incarnation spanned tens of thousands of feet like a celestial river. His cold and domineering sword light forced venerable swordsman Streamlight, who was also at the second-tier primordial spirit stage, to the point that he could only use the speed advantage of the instant sword escape to dodge. He did not dare to face it head-on. An old sword immortal, who had tempered his dermic powers and sword Dao for 10,000 years, could not gain any advantage against venerable swordsman Little Shang, who was not even half his age. He was even forced into a disadvantageous position. The situation was getting more and more dangerous. Venerable swordsman Fluttering Snow's sword intent spread across the sky. It was ever-changing and had shocking destructive power. It could instantly shatter the entire void. Old Sword Immortal's great Dao heavenly sword had brilliant sword light that shot up into the 9 heavens. It was a power that pierced through the heavens and earth, completely ignoring the barriers of time and space. Celestial Light Sword Sect's instant sword escape comprehended the mysteries of time and grasped the true meaning of instant, one of the two extremes of time. It grasped the profound meaning of instant, which was 1/60th of a flick of a finger. The Thunderbolt Sword Sect's sword Dao was extremely violent and unyielding. The Constellation Sword Sect's sword Dao used the sword Dao to manifest the changes of thousands of stars. Every sword Dao contained great power, and each contained boundless profundities. However, in front of the Shushan sword Dao, all of them paled in comparison. Shushan's 6 meridian swords were all different, but all of them had reached the pinnacle within their own domain, becoming the pinnacle of similar sword Daos. And their source, the heavenly immortal sword Qi, was even stronger. It was so extensive that it contained all of the sword Daos of the divine land. All the swords in the world came from Shushan. It was an incomparably harsh sentence, but Old Sword Immortal, Ben Lazy, Venerable Sun Luminary, and the others could not refute it. Duan Yu, don't waste your breath. Venerable Guan Chong said indifferently, we previously received news that the Mystic Gates sect master, Lin Feng, is also here. Other than the sky-piercing, Great Qin, and Liuguang families, this person is also the main person. Ning Lang nodded. With the 6 meridian swords gathered, this person can no longer be arrogant. Venerable Guan Chong said, although that Lin Feng's sword Dao is sharp, he did not dare to face sect master head-on in the cloudy forest world. It can be seen that the heavenly immortal sword Qi can restrain this person's sword Dao. Sect Master said that his sword Dao is of great use to our Shushan, and this is our chance. That's right. If we can capture this person, it's naturally for the best. Ning Lang answered, even if we can't capture him, we have to get the foundations of his sword Dao out of him. Oh, so Shushan cares so much about me? The two of them conversed, and before their voices finished, a crack suddenly tore open in the void. Surging purple qi gushed out from within. Following that, a figure dressed in purple robes slowly walked out from the spatial crack. It was Lin Feng. Seeing Lin Feng, Ning Lang's heart suddenly turned cold. Lin Feng's shocking sword that day surfaced in his mind again, making his heart palpitate. As a sword cultivator, his will was firm. Towards something that threatened him, his first reaction was not to fear and submit, but to kill the other party by all means possible. At this moment, facing Lin Feng again, thinking of how his side had sent out all the experts this time around, Ning Lang's heart instantly calmed down. Looking at Lin Feng, he said, "You are also here to participate in this gathering to have an exchange of sword Dao? That couldn't be better. After our last meeting, I have always wanted to experience your sword Dao again." Lin Feng swept a glance over him, and then looked at the other Shushan sword cultivators. His gaze lingered on Honorable Swordsman Guan Chong, Honorable Swordsman Li, and the other two sword masters for a moment, a playful smile on his lips. "What, only when you have enough people standing behind you will you have the courage to draw your sword?" Ning Lang did not answer but growled, "Draw your sword." He directly shed his human form, transforming into a huge bronze sword that was 10 meters long and as wide as a door. It was thick and powerful, fierce and domineering, and exuded a powerful aura. Immediately, Ning Lang pushed the power of his Shaoshang sword to the limit. "Draw your sword?" Lin Feng smiled. "I had thought that you were a sword cultivator, and had some backbone. But now it seems that you are completely unworthy of my sword." Suddenly, a black and white taiji pattern appeared on his forehead, constantly intertwining and rotating. From the taiji diagram, tens of thousands of golden flames suddenly surged out, landing in the air, and instantly transforming into a fiery figure that faced Ning Lang. Chapter 483. Lin Feng himself stood motionless on the spot. A taiji symbol appeared on his forehead, and from the taiji symbol, large amounts of golden flames surged out. These golden flames rapidly transformed into a giant that was more than 200 zhang tall in the air. Its entire body shone with a dazzling golden light, as though thousands of golden needles had gathered together. It was extremely glaring, and these golden needles were all extremely condensed flames. One of the 7 great true fires in the world, the true sun fire godlight. The moment this flame giant appeared in the air, a violent feeling of power shook the entire void, shocking everyone. This golden flame giant's robes fluttered in the wind, and his outer appearance was exactly the same as Lin Feng's. His facial features were also the same as Lin Feng's, except that be it his clothes or skin, they were all formed from dazzling golden flames. A sun-like symbol gradually appeared on the forehead of the flame giant Lin Feng, as though it was burning fiercely on his forehead. Standing in the void, he was like the sun, incomparably dazzling. 4 symbols heaven opening scripture, fire, great sun god fist. Without waiting for sword venerable of broken mountains Ning Lang to react, the golden flame giant Lin Feng directly punched out. The void suddenly exploded, and there was a fiery red. In the center of the spatial turbulence, there was only a blazing sun hanging high in the sky. Everything in the world returned to silence, and only this blazing sun shone like the sun in the sky, becoming the supreme ruler of this world, the one and only emperor. My light and heat give life to all living things, and my light and heat can also instantly destroy all living things. The life and death of all living things in the world depend on my words. Shushan's Shaoshang sword was fierce and forceful, incomparably domineering. It was the most ferocious sword Dao mystique in the divine land, but at this moment, facing this punch from Lin Feng, it actually felt powerless. If you are domineering, I will be even more domineering. This was the concept of the power of this punch from Lin Feng. The huge bronze sword formed by Ning Lang's primordial spirit seemed to have become a broken piece of straw at this moment, and was directly sent flying by Lin Feng's great sun god fist. The huge sword flew back thousands of li before it stopped moving. Its surface was covered in cracks like a spider web, and it was incomparably miserable. The edges of the sword began to shatter, and the giant's sword wailed in despair. It was about to be completely shattered by Lin Feng's punch. Honorable swordsman Guan Chong quickly flashed to the side of the huge sword. He used his own Guan Chong sword's sword intent and dermic powers to stabilize the huge sword that was about to shatter. This huge sword was Ning Lang's primordial spirit incarnation. If he allowed it to shatter, Ning Lang would die here. A first-tier essence soul sword cultivator, sword venerable of broken mountains, Ning Lang of Mount Shu's Shaoshang swordsmithing faction, was almost killed by Lin Feng with a single punch. Even sword venerable solar luminary and the others were stunned by what they saw. When they looked at Lin Feng again, they could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. Isn't he a sword cultivator? Why does my primordial spirit avatar look like this? Wait, that's not right. Sun Luminary Sword Venerable's eyes widened. This isn't his nascent divinity incarnation at all. This is just one of his divine ability Dharmakaya? Ben Lazy, Star Constellation Sword Venerable, and the others gasped in unison. They saw two figures, one big and one small, standing in the void. The big one was naturally the giant formed from golden flames. The small one was standing silently behind the giant. It was Lin Feng himself. He was standing there perfectly fine, not revealing his primordial spirit avatar at all. The flame giant in front of him that had sent Ning Lang flying with a single punch was completely formed from his dermic powers. It had nothing to do with his primordial spirit avatar at all. This golden flame giant was known as the Great Sun Emperor. It was a divine ability Dharmakaya that was formed from the fist will of the Great Sun Divine Fist and his dermic powers of Lin Feng. It was the product of a divine ability Dharmakaya that had been cultivated to the extreme. Although its power was strong, it was only formed temporarily from dermic powers. It could not even be considered a clone. It could barely be considered an external body. However, its power was much weaker than the primordial spirit avatar that a cultivator could truly manifest. To be able to cultivate a divine ability Dharmakaya, firstly, a primordial spirit cultivator had to cultivate their own divine ability Dharmakaya to the great perfection realm. Secondly, the divine ability itself had to be strong enough. There were very few techniques that could cultivate a divine ability Dharmakaya. Other than Lin Feng, there were other primordial spirit experts who had condensed their own divine ability Dharmakaya. Divine ability Dharmakaya had many benefits. It could be gathered and dispersed at any time. Even if it was damaged, it would not harm the foundation. However, it was not often used during the crucial moments of life and death. This was because it could weaken the power of the primordial spirit avatar. Usually, when using a divine ability Dharmakaya, it was either the two parties were just testing each other, or when one party was far stronger than the other party, or when the main body could not leave, the divine ability Dharmakaya would travel far away and replace the main body to fight. However, for Lin Feng to use a divine ability Dharmakaya to almost shatter the primordial spirit avatar of Shu Shan's sword venerable of broken mountains with a single punch, the power was truly terrifying. The void was distorted. Venerable Li Meng, who originally wanted to kill Venerable Flying Snow, gave up on his opponent and rushed towards Lin Feng. The sword will around his body surged and was extremely sharp. Last year, I wanted to go to Kunlun Mountain but was stopped by Taishu Temple. Today, I can finally get my wish. As Venerable Li Meng spoke, a dazzling cold light started surging from his body. In an instant, it was as though thousands of sword lights were shooting out from his body. His entire body was wrapped in sword lights, and he was filled with ferocity and killing intent. And in the void far away, a sword hum shook the sky. The brilliant sword lights were like the Milky Way flowing in reverse, tearing everything in front of it apart. It also slashed towards Lin Feng's head. It was Venerable Little Shang. He gave up on Venerable Flowing Light, who had been chasing after him, and also charged towards Lin Feng. Gathering chicken feathers to gather your courage. Ganging up on me? Lin Feng laughed. The divine ability avatar of the great Sun Emperor in front of him waved its fist towards venerable little Shang. Lin Feng himself was still standing in the void, and the Taiji diagram on his forehead revolved again. Instantly, rays of jade light surged. As the waves surged, endless jade light extended towards the vast and boundless void. Very quickly, it turned into a jade-green tide, boundless and boundless. In the void, a sea suddenly appeared out of nowhere. As the tide rolled, there were suddenly huge waves. In the sea, there was a huge whirlpool that kept revolving. A huge amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy was sucked into this huge whirlpool. The whirlpool became bigger and bigger, until it finally expanded to a radius of 100 miles. At the bottom of the deep whirlpool, there was suddenly a shocking energy wave. A tall figure gradually rose up. Similar to the great Sun Emperor, he was also over 200 feet tall. His facial features and clothing were exactly the same as Lin Feng himself. It was just that this tall figure was completely jade green, and it shone with a bright luster. Another divine ability avatar? Venerable Li Meng's eyes flashed fiercely. His ferocious sword will suddenly exploded, turning into a fierce sword light that pierced towards the giant rising from the jade sea. The sword light was incomparably resplendent. Within the sword light, countless sword chi and sword intent surged, and the sword will turned into a physical form. It was even more shocking and ferocious than venerable Little Shang's sword. 4 symbols heaven opening book, water, boundless sea art. That jade-green giant was called the Boundless Sea Emperor. It was a divine ability avatar formed from Lin Feng's boundless sea art. Facing the fierce, venerable Li Meng, it immediately went up. Whoosh! What was shocking was that the Boundless Sea Emperor avatar, which looked no weaker than the great Sun Emperor, was actually sliced in half by venerable Li Meng's sword light. Could it be that it is just for show? Just as this thought rose in the minds of the crowd, they saw the jade waves below the Boundless Sea Emperor. As the waves surged, the Boundless Sea Emperor's already broken body rapidly recovered to its original state. Ben Lazy seemed to wake up from a dream. The Jade Sea is endless, but this body is indestructible. Unless it can destroy the entire Jade Sea in one go, this divine ability avatar is immortal and can regenerate endlessly. Venerable Star Constellation Sword asked doubtfully, but how can it defeat the enemy with just strong regenerative abilities? At this moment, someone walked out from the Shushan camp. I will handle it. Martial Uncle, please attack the heart of the enemy. This was a great sword cultivator at the first tier of the primordial spirit transformation realm. His name was Venerable Moon Reflector, and he was currently the strongest cultivator of the great Yin Sword faction. The entire Shushan had high hopes for him. Once he reached the second tier of the primordial spirit transformation realm, he would take over the title of Venerable Moon Sword Lord and become the new sword master of the great Yin Sword faction. In fact, he was now temporarily in charge of the daily affairs of the great Yin Sword faction. This person unleashed his swordsmanship cultivation of the Taiyin sword, entangling the reformed boundless ocean emperor like clouds and mist. Without needing Venerable Moon Reflector to say anything, Venerable Li Meng had already taken advantage of the moment the Boundless Sea Emperor was destroyed to bypass the Jade Sea and attack Lin Feng himself. But the next moment all his hair stood on end. He turned back in shock and saw the reformed Boundless Sea Emperor forming a sword seal with his right hand. Countless sword gleams burst forth from his body, and the ferocious sword will made everyone pale with fright. It was not that this sword was strong, but that this sword was a living replica of Shushan's Venerable Li sword. How is this possible? Venerable Li Meng was undoubtedly the most shocked person. In the entire Shushan, other than the third-tier primordial spirit transformation realm sect Master Xian Longxing and a few Grand Supreme Elders, he was the strongest cultivator of the Venerable Li sword. He could tell at a glance whether the other party had imitated it or had truly comprehended the essence of this sword Tao. Although it was still a little shaky, although there were some changes, fundamentally, the sword that the boundless Sea Emperor had used was the Venerable Li sword of Shushan. Venerable Moon Reflector hurriedly dodged, and Venerable Li Meng also forcefully stopped his forward momentum, evading the boundless Sea Emperor's shocking sword. And the boundless Sea Emperor's performance had just begun. After the Venerable Li sword, the sword seal changed, and the 200-meter-tall giant unleashed an incomparably gentle sword Dao. The sky was filled with sword chi like clouds and mist. Venerable Moon Reflector almost vomited blood. F***CK. The Great Yin Sword. It was extremely gentle, ethereal, and unpredictable sword will. The sword Dao that the boundless Sea Emperor was currently using was another sword Dao of Shushan's 6 Meridians sword Dao, the Great Yin Sword. From the sidelines, Ben Lazy and Venerable Star Constellation looked at each other. Even though they were on the same side as Lin Feng, they still felt bitter in their mouth. Could it be that anyone who fights with this Dharmakaya will instantly comprehend the mystique and spiritual arts? For a moment, everyone's gazes landed on Lin Feng, who was standing quietly in the void. They saw him smiling as he leisurely watched his 2 mystique clones fight with the 2 second-tier primordial spirit realm sword cultivators from the Shushan sword sect, who were in an earth-shattering battle. Chapter 484. The Boundless Ocean Emperor intimidated the crowd, and the Great Sun Emperor did not let him have the upper hand. A strong light burst forth from the Great Sun Emperor's body, and a bright light gathered in his palm, turning into a sun, rising up and shining brightly. In the next moment, this sun suddenly disappeared, like a heavenly dog swallowing the sun. Even the Great Sun Emperor's body formed from pure golden flames fell into darkness, like a black hole that swallowed up all light. In this darkness, the Great Sun Emperor's avatar gave off a terrifying aura that made one's heart palpitate. Its power was condensed like a calamity. It was as if as long as he willed it, he could destroy the space that everyone was in with a wave of his hand. Great Sun God Fist, Sun Eclipse Change. Lin Feng's Great Sun God Fist was obtained after combining the power of the sun's true fire with the grand concept of the creation of heaven and earth, and it was extremely powerful. And this eclipse transformation's first transformation was to burn up the essence of sunlight and the true fire's divine light in an instant, so that one could instantly erupt with combat power that was far beyond ordinary. This extremely ferocious fist clashed with the Little Shang sword, and the result was that sword Venerable Little Shang was sent flying. The majestic sword light that was like the Milky Way shattered into thousands of streams of light, scattering in all directions. It was as if a treasured sword that could cut through metal like mud had clashed head-on with a huge hammer. No matter how sharp it was, it could not withstand such a violent collision. The Great Sun Yen Emperor's avatar wavered on the spot, and the power of the sun eclipse change dissipated. The flames lit up once more, and there were some places that had been slashed by the Shaoshang sword, but these wounds did not weaken the Great Sun Yen Emperor, but made him even more ferocious. The sword light dissipated, revealing a sword-wielding man with a strong aura. He was 100 feet tall, holding a huge sword, and had a stern face, his eyes like lightning. It was Sword Venerable Little Shang's Void Return avatar. At the last moment, Sword Venerable Little Shang displayed his strongest move, transforming his primordial spirit into a Void Return avatar, which was why he did not follow in Ning Lang's footsteps, and was almost killed by Lin Feng's Great Sun God Fist. Sword Venerable Guan Chong looked at this scene in shock. He has such powerful battle power just with his avatar? Could it be that back then in the Cloud Forest world, he was afraid of the complicated situation, so he wasn't willing to make a move? Or could it be that the one in Cloud Forest realm back then was simply just a clone of his? Taking a deep breath, Sword Venerable Guan Chong suppressed all his questions and said in a deep voice, "Don't worry about Sword Immortal anymore." Almost before he opened his mouth, Sword Lord Shaozi, who had been suppressing Old Sword Immortal in the distance, had already withdrawn. Like Sword Lord Xiaoshang, he abandoned his original opponent and charged toward Lin Feng. In the blink of an eye, the junior sword venerable crossed the endless space and arrived in front of Lin Feng. He snorted and transformed into a swordsman who was 20 feet tall, wearing a tall hat and ancient clothes. The long sword in his hand turned into a cold gleam. The cold light flashed and instantly turned into a sky full of starlight. In an instant, it traversed thousands of space-time and aimed at Lin Feng. Learning from Sword Lord Xiaoshang and Sword Lord Li Meng's lessons, Sword Lord Xiaozi revealed his void return dermic physique right from the start. On the other side, Sword Lord Guan Chong disregarded the fact that his vital qi had yet to recover and also revealed his void return dermic physique. He transformed into the image of a burly man who was 70 feet tall and carried a huge sword. That huge sword was round and edgeless, looking like a huge iron bar. However, it possessed an aura that could suppress all nothingness and bear the weight of 1,000 caddies. In addition to Sword Lord Xiaoshang and Sword Lord Li Meng, the 4 great Void Return Realm Sword Masters of Mount Shu Sword Sect attacked Lin Feng together. Lin Feng still had a calm expression on his face. He raised his hand and lightly tapped the space between his eyebrows. 2 more powerful energy concepts rushed out from the Tai Chi runes on his forehead. When these 2 concepts landed in the void, they also instantly transformed into 2 huge human figures that were over 2,000 feet tall. Their facial features and appearance were exactly the same as Lin Feng, the Great Sun Emperor, and the Boundless Ocean Emperor. Shockingly, they were 2 of Lin Feng's divine ability dermic bodies again. 4 symbols heaven opening scripture, wind, divine time wind. 4 symbols heaven opening scripture, earth, heaven bearing seal. A formless, shadowless, and colorless storm condensed in the void, transforming into an almost transparent giant. This was the dermic body that Lin Feng had transformed from the Divine Time Wind divine ability. Its name was Divine Time Wind Emperor, and it went up to meet Sword Lord Xiaoshang. Sword Lord Xiaoshang used his sword will and spiritual power to the extreme. As the sword light changed, it transformed into a myriad of stars. This was not a feint, nor was it an illusion. Every sword light that was like a cold star was real. Just one sword strike was enough to severely injure or even kill a primordial spirit transformation realm expert. Each ray of sword light represented a possibility in that instant. Facing Sword Lord Xiaoshang, Wind Emperor chanted, "The vicissitudes of the world in an instant. A flash of light has passed for 1,000 years." Power surged around him, and a sharp astral wind instantly swept through the surrounding space, enveloping all of Sword Lord Xiaoshang's sword light. There was a strange tremor in the space, and all the sword light disappeared. All that was left was a short swordsman wearing a high crown and ancient robes. The long sword in his hand was flashing with a cold light. All the onlookers were stunned. This was because they had just witnessed this scene. It was the exact moment when Sword Lord Xiaoshang was about to unleash his return to void stage Dharma body. In the next instant, the tip of the longsword in his hand transformed into a cold light, and it was about to transform into thousands of sword lights that entered different planes of time to assassinate Lin Feng. But now, this scene was replaying before everyone's eyes. Sword Lord Solar Luminary and the others naturally didn't think that they were seeing things or that they were hallucinating. There was only one reason for this, and that was that Wind Emperor Xiaoshang's power had forcibly reversed the flow of time in the space where Sword Lord Xiaoshang had just been. Although it was only for a short instant, it was already astonishing enough. Sword Lord Xiaoshang was a sword cultivator of the Return to Void stage, and he had also cultivated in a divine ability like Sword Lord Xiaoshang. He had also comprehended some of the mysteries of time. His consciousness was extremely clear, and he immediately understood what had happened. However, Wind Emperor Xiaoshang had already taken advantage of this opportunity to close in on Sword Lord Xiaoshang before Sword Lord Xiaoshang could unleash its power. Powerful gales of wind swept violently toward Sword Lord Xiaoshang's return to void stage Dharma body, forcing Sword Lord Xiaoshang into a sorry state. Meanwhile, on the other side, streaks of earthy yellow light converged to form a mighty giant. The giant made a seal with both hands before crushing down toward Sword Lord Guanchong. A powerful power-intent realm emanated from the giant's body. It wasn't sharp or ferocious, but it was extremely heavy, powerful, and indestructible. It was like the earth that bore the weight of the heavens and nurtured all things. Any power that fell upon the earth would be able to withstand it. At the same time, the earth was also extremely heavy, capable of suppressing all things and preventing them from wreaking havoc. The return to void stage Dharma body manifested by Sword Lord Guanchong advanced toward Lin Feng step by step with the ancient and solemn sword intent of Sword Lord Guanchong. However, he didn't expect to encounter Lin Feng's Dharma body, Emperor of Heaven and Earth, which was condensed from the heaven-bearing seal divine ability. It was a battle of clumsiness against clumsiness, a battle of great ingenuity against great ingenuity. Even though Sword Lord Guanchong had unleashed his own sword realm, he was still unable to withstand the increasingly heavy pressure. In the Mount Shu sword sex camp, a middle-aged man with a calm and composed aura unsheathed his sword to assist Sword Lord Guanchong. The sword projection he unleashed was pure gold. It wasn't ostentatious or sharp. Instead, it was calm and heavy, like a mountain that could hold up the seas and the heavens. However, in the face of this sword, many people felt as if they were a head shorter. They felt guilty and could only kneel down obediently, repent their sins, and peacefully await execution. The Shaoyang sword was the most neutral and peaceful sword among the 6 lineages of Mount Shu. It was the most difficult to cultivate, but after mastering it, it would be flawless and without any flaws. It was widely recognized as the strongest of the 6 lineages. Sword Lord Xiaoyang was guarding his hometown in Mount Shu and didn't come to Tianjia Peak. However, there was someone from the Shaoyang sword sect who came with Sword Lord Guanchong and the others. It was the number 1 expert of the Shaoyang sword sect, second only to the sword master, Sword Lord Qintian. Although he was only at the first tier of the primordial spirit transformation realm, his aura was as imposing as a mountain. Even the second tier of the primordial spirit transformation realm, Sword Lord Flying Snow, and Sword Lord Streamlight, didn't dare to underestimate him. Sword Lord Qintian wanted to use the Shaoyang sword to assist Sword Lord Guanchong to break through Lin Feng's Emperor of Heaven's seal. However, Lin Feng didn't take it to heart at all. The 200 zhang tall Emperor of Heaven and Earth formed a seal with both hands and continued to press down, directly suppressing Sword Lord Qintian. The neutral and calm golden sword light couldn't hold on under the immense power of the divine land, and kept trembling. Sword Lord Xiaoshang and Sword Lord Xiaozi joined in the siege against Lin Feng. Sword Lord Streamlight and Sword Lord Old Immortal were able to extricate themselves and returned to the side of Sword Lord Solar Luminary and the others. Everyone looked at everything that was happening in front of them in shock. They saw Lin Feng with his hands behind his back. He had a calm expression on his face, and there was even a relaxed smile on his lips. As for the 4 divine ability avatars that he manifested, they each displayed their unique abilities. Not only did they fight against Sword Lord Xiaoshang, Sword Lord Xiaozi, Sword Lord Guanchong, and Sword Lord Li Xiong, they even brought Sword Lord Moonreflector and Sword Lord Qintian along with them. Fighting 1 against 6, he suppressed 6 primordial spirit transformation realm sword cultivators of Mount Shu and gained the upper hand. Even until now, Lin Feng hadn't revealed his primordial spirit incarnation. Sword Lord Flying Snow's aura was waning. Until now, he had yet to completely regain his breath. However, he stared at the battle unblinkingly, Divine ability secret arts that allow one to condense an avatar are extremely rare and precious. He actually grasped 4 of them at once, and he has cultivated all of them to the supreme realm of grand perfection, condensing 4 great avatars at once. Sword Lord Old Immortal had a similarly solemn expression. Remarkable ability, remarkable ability. One divine ability avatar is able to suppress the Sword Master Grandmaster, a cultivator at the 2nd level of primordial spirit transformation realm, who wields the swords of Mount Shu lineage. Divine ability avatars will weaken the strength of the primordial spirit incarnation. Condensing too many divine ability avatars will even place a huge burden on the primordial spirit. Star Constellation Sword Lord muttered, but looking at the appearance of this master of Xianmen, he seems to be extremely relaxed. Clearly, splitting these 4 avatars is still a piece of cake for him. It might not even affect the combat power of his primordial spirit incarnation. Sword Lord Solar Luminary let out a long sigh. If that's the case, how strong is his combat power? Such magic power can be said to be boundless. It was common to describe the strength of martial cultivators. They were said to have remarkable abilities and boundless magic power. But what kind of person could be said to have remarkable abilities and boundless magic power? At this moment, everyone present, including many Shushan sword cultivators, looked towards Lin Feng, a thought appearing in their minds. This was remarkable abilities and boundless magic power. Sword Lord Little Shang, who was once again forced back by the great Sun Emperor, had an extremely solemn expression. He roared, "I was originally prepared for this. Now it's time to strike." Formation. Chapter 485. Get into formation. Following Honorable Swordsman Xiao Shang's shout, Honorable Swordsman Li Meng, Honorable Swordsman Xiao Zhe and Honorable Swordsman Guan Chong all retreated. Both Sword Venerable Reaching Sky and Sword Venerable Moonshine pinched their swords with solemn expressions and shouted in unison, "Go!" A sword cry rang out as 2 majestic sword lights soared into the sky. One was calm and steady while the other was unpredictable. They actually forcefully blocked the attacks of the boundless Ocean Emperor and the Earth Emperor. Such strength was not something a First Firmament Essence Soul Sword cultivator should have. Everyone looked at each other, and Old Sword Immortal said in a deep voice, "It's the Xiao Yang sword and the Tai Yin sword." At that moment, Sword Venerable Qing Tian and Sword Venerable Moonshine revealed their essence spirit incarnations and placed their essence spirits completely on the 2 swords. They were 2 magical treasures, flying swords. They were majestic and powerful, as if endless sword intent was spreading out in all directions. They were not something that ordinary magical treasures could match. Everyone in the world knew that Shu Mountain had the immortal heaven sword, the most powerful killing treasure in the divine land. It was extremely powerful and could control the fate of Shu Mountain. It had been more than 4,000 years since the last war between the 2 worlds. Below the immortal heaven sword, Shu Mountain also had the 6 meridian immortal swords, which were controlled by the sword masters and grandmasters of the 6 meridian swords. They were also powerful magical treasures that were world famous. They had been refined by the descendants of the 6 meridian swords for tens of thousands of years and were constantly strengthened. Furthermore, they were worshipped by countless disciples of Shu Mountain. Any one of them had the power to split the sky and earth. And now 2 of the 6 meridians' celestial swords had appeared before their eyes. The Xiaoyang sword was the most precious treasure of Shu Mountain's Xiaoyang sword lineage. The sword was 10 feet long and the blade was 1 foot wide. The sword's body was simple and dignified, and it was oval like a pillar. There were no edges on either side of the sword, only a sharp tip. It symbolized a dignified and righteous aura, not using killing power to subdue others. It was perfect and flawless, and the benevolent were invincible. The Taiyin sword was the inherited treasure of Mount Shu's Taiyin sword branch. Only the hilt could be seen with the naked eye, and the blade could not be seen. Above the hilt floated layers of clouds and mist, making it hard to grasp. Amidst the clouds and mist, a bright sword light could be vaguely seen. It was like moonlight, waxing and waning, ever-changing. The sword master of Mount Shu's 6 meridian swords, venerated lunar swordsman, had already fallen. Venerated Shaoyang swordsmen stayed in Mount Shu and did not come out. There were only 4 6 meridians sword masters present. However, Sword Venerable Soaring Sky and Sword Venerable Moonshine brought the Shaoyang sword and the Moon Reflection sword with them. They did not use them before because it was too much of a burden for them to wield the 2 swords with their cultivation. But now it did not matter. The 2 of them had brought out their respective treasures from the sword lineage in order to cooperate with Honorable Swordsman Little Shang and the other 3 to set up the Mount Shu Sword Sect's famous 6 Meridians Heavenly Immortal Sword Formation. Honorable Swordsman Xiao Shang, Honorable Swordsman Xiao Zhe, Honorable Swordsman Li, Honorable Swordsman Guan Chong, Honorable Swordsman Qing Tian who controlled the Shaoyang sword, and Honorable Swordsman Ying Yu who controlled the Tai Yin sword. The 6 of them formed a hexagon and stood at each corner, forming a formation. Instantly, a murderous aura filled the air, causing the space to tremble. 6 pillars of light shot into the sky with Sword Venerable Little Shang and the others at the center. Each pillar of light contained an extreme sword Dao. The pillar of light with Honorable Swordsman Little Shang at the center was the thickest. Cold light flashed, shocking one's soul. The sword intent was the most ferocious and violent, as though it could destroy everything in the world. And in the pillar of light conjured by Honorable Swordsman Little Shang, countless spatial fragments resonated with each other. They were crystal clear, and the power of time was infused into them. Countless lights and shadows flashed. Honorable Swordsman Guan Chong stood silently in the void. The pillar of light around him was pure black, like a hard rock or iron. It was extremely dignified, like a heavenly pillar that supported the heavens. The pillar of light around Honorable Swordsman Fierce Li was the weakest. It was not even comparable to the first-tier essence Soul Realm Sword Venerable Soaring Sky and Sword Venerable Moonshine. However, this seemingly weak pillar of light contained the fiercest murderous aura. It was the strongest of the 6 swords. Sword Venerable Soaring Sky had completely placed his primordial spirit on the Shaoyang sword. The Shaoyang sword floated calmly in the air with its tip pointed upwards. The majestic and peaceful sword light was filled with the majestic aura of the Tao of Kings. It did not allow anyone to offend it. Sword Venerable Moonshine was the same as Sword Venerable Soaring Sky. He had also placed his primordial spirit on the Taiyin sword. His was the most unique among the 6 swords. The other 5 swords were sword light, but his was still a cloud-like sword qi. It floated up into the sky like a cloud pillar. The 6 swords of Shushan gathered together, pushing their sword intent and spiritual power to the extreme. The terrifying sword intent combined and pierced through the void for thousands of miles. Even space was torn apart, and the cracks were dotted with stars, revealing the distant starry sea of the universe. What was even more terrifying was that the sword intent of the 6 pulse swords of Shushan was constantly fusing with each other, growing and stimulating each other. Just the fusion of the 2 swords had already increased their power to a terrifying level. Now that the 6 swords were resonating together, the sword intent and spiritual power were constantly rising at a geometrical speed. The 6-pulse Heavenly Immortal Sword Formation of Shushan was a famous killing formation in the Divine Land. In the history of the human cultivation world, every time this formation was used, a primordial spirit expert would definitely fall to it. It had never failed. Old Sword Immortal looked at this shocking scene and sighed. The 6-pulse Heavenly Immortal Sword Formation of Shushan is really terrifying. The Heavenly Sword Sect was second in the 9 Heavenly Sword League. They had been constantly developing and strengthening their strength, hoping to one day challenge the position of Shushan and ascend to the throne of the number 1 Holy Land of Swordsmanship. However, this was destined to be a distant dream for a very long time. Sword Venerable Sunlight said in a deep voice, "They specially brought the Shaoyang sword and the Taiyin sword here to set up this sword formation. What will the master of the Taoist sect do?" The others all looked at Lin Feng, only to see Lin Feng watching with interest as the six-pulse heavenly immortal sword formation of Shushan took shape. He's actually not stopping the other party from setting up the formation? Isn't that a little too arrogant? Since Lin Feng did not move, Sword Venerable Little Shang and the others naturally would not stand on ceremony. The spiritual power of the six surged together, and the six ultimate sword intents fused into one, forming a white chaotic whole. The white chaotic whole swirled with air currents, and an extremely terrifying power was being born from within. Ben Lazy smiled sadly. It's here, it's here. Heavenly Immortal Sword Qi. It's finally here. This is the true terror of the six-pulse Heavenly Immortal Sword formation. Although the six-pulse swords of Shushan each walked an extreme path, they actually came from the same source. They were the supreme swords of Shushan, the Heavenly Immortal Sword Qi. The six-pulse Heavenly Immortal Sword formation's infamy had spread throughout the great heaven primordial world because when the formation was activated to its extreme, the six swords would become one, and the Heavenly Immortal Sword Qi could be unleashed. Finally, an extremely fine sword Qi shot out from the white chaotic hole, heading straight for Lin Feng. The sword Qi looked extremely weak, like a gentle breeze, but it was extremely terrifying. It contained a grand power that could pierce through the heavens and earth, and could evolve into thousands of swords. It was the ultimate sublimation of thousands of swords into one, and it was also the starting point and source of all swords in the world. It was both the starting point and the final destination. The moment this sword Qi appeared, everyone present grunted. Be it the second-tier primordial spirit realm cultivator's old sword immortal, Sword Venerable Flying Snow, Celerita's swordsman, or the first-tier primordial spirit realm cultivator's Sword Venerable Sun, Sword Venerable Constellation, or Ben Lazy, all of them trembled violently. It was as if the depths of their souls had been shaken, and they had a feeling of wanting to submit. That was the sword intent that they had attained Tao stirring. It was like the most primal instinct, like a rabbit seeing a lion, or a mantis seeing an oriole. In the mortal world, between rulers and subjects, the ruler wanted the subject to die, and the subject had no choice but to die. And the source of all this was that seemingly weak, but in fact extremely terrifying sword Qi. Heavenly Immortal Sword Qi. Once the Heavenly Immortal Sword appeared, all swords would submit. This sword was undoubtedly the Emperor of Swords in the great heaven primordial world. Once it appeared, all swords would return to their roots and fight to worship it. The Yuanying sword cultivator from the Songhai sword sect spat out a mouthful of blood. Yuanying was almost shaken out of his body. Old Sword Immortal and the other great sword cultivators at the primordial spirit realm had extremely ugly expressions. They could still resist the pressure from the Heavenly Immortal Sword Qi, but they also felt extremely uncomfortable. Other than the discomfort of their primordial spirit dermic powers, they felt even more humiliated on a spiritual level. Why did most sword Tao sects more or less have the intention to resist Shu Mountain? Because to them, if they did not resist, they could only gradually become vassals of Shu Mountain. To these experts who had attained the primordial spirit realm, when faced with such an enemy, their first reaction would never be to submit. They would only think of ways to unite and destroy this opponent. But every time they truly faced the Heavenly Immortal Sword Qi, they would all feel a deep sense of despair. And now, this terrifying Heavenly Immortal Sword Qi was cleaving down on Lin Feng's head. The concept of power contained in the Sword Qi was extremely pure and simple. It wanted to pierce through all obstacles in front of it. All obstructions were futile. Sword Venerable Little Shang, Sword Venerable Shaozi, Sword Venerable Guan Chong, Sword Venerable Li Xiong, Sword Venerable Towering Sky, and Sword Venerable Moon Reflection. The 6 great sword cultivators shouted in unison, "All swords in the world come out of Shu Mountain. Master of the Mystic Gate, take our heavenly immortal sword Qi." Back in the cloudy forest realm, Lin Feng did not take the heavenly immortal sword Qi head-on when facing the Shu Mountain sword sect leader Xian Longxing's heavenly immortal sword Qi. Facing this heaven primordial first sword again, Lin Feng's lips suddenly curled into a smile. If it was Xian Longxing, it might be possible. You guys can't do it. Lin Feng's main body finally moved. With a light clap of his palms, the sky-bearing Emperor of Earth, the boundless Ocean Emperor, the Great Sun Emperor, and the Time-Light Emperor of Wind, the 4 huge avatars of over 600 zhang tall, shattered at the same time. Endless, surging earth, water, fire, and wind churned the entire void into a chaotic mess. But this time, Lin Feng did not allow the 4 images to go berserk. Instead, he used his own dermic powers to stabilize the 4 images. The earth, water, fire, and wind returned to their original positions and became balanced again. In the void turbulence, something that looked like a bubble appeared. Lin Feng stretched out his finger and tapped the bubble lightly. The bubble instantly burst, and 2 streams of air, one clear and one turbid, rushed out. An incomparably powerful force flowed out from it. That was the origin of the world, the beginning of a place's creation. It was a powerful force that could split the heavens and earth apart. Lin Feng smiled faintly. Primordial Heaven Splitting Technique. The majestic force that split the heavens and earth apart met the heavenly immortal sword Qi of Shu Mountain's 6 meridian heavenly immortal sword formation. Chapter 486. With a flick of Lin Feng's finger, the bubble burst. 2 streams of air, one clear and one turbid, rushed out, and a powerful intent of splitting the heavens and earth manifested. The turbid air sank, settling and condensing, solidifying into a physical form. It transformed into the earth, then into mountains and rivers. The clear air rose, vast and mysterious. It transformed into the sky, then into the stars, the sun, and the moon. The immense power that rearranged the earth, water, fire, and wind, and separated the heavens and earth, directly suppressed the heavenly immortal sword Qi that Sword Venerable Little Shang and the others had unleashed through the 6 meridian immortal heaven sword formation. The Tai Chi diagram on Lin Feng's forehead spun continuously, and his spiritual power surged, transforming into an almost unstoppable attack. It was like the tide of time, crushing and drowning all opponents who dared to try and stop a chariot. At this moment, even the mysterious heavenly immortal sword Qi had met an opponent that it could not penetrate. It was as if it was being suppressed by a world, and it was being pushed back. Sword Venerable Little Shang and the others were furious, but there was nothing they could do. The unstoppable power of the heavenly immortal sword Qi was all crushing down on the 6 of them. The majestic intent of splitting the heavens and earth instantly made them suffer unspeakably. Sword Venerable Little Shang, Sword Venerable Shaozi, and Sword Venerable Li Xiong were fine, but Sword Venerable Guanchong, who had yet to recover, and Sword Venerable Sky Raising Sword and Sword Venerable Moon Reflecting Sword were in big trouble. The primordial spirits of Sword Venerable Sky Raising Sword and Sword Venerable Moon Reflecting Sword were directly separated from the Shaoyang Sword and Taiyin Sword. Their primordial spirits were extremely weak, and they were completely relying on the 2 immortal swords to continue supporting the sword formation. Sword Venerable Guanchong had no choice but to manifest his Void Return Dharma body to support the sword formation. Void Return Dharma bodies were extremely precious. Although they were powerful, once they were damaged, it would cause great harm to the primordial spirit cultivator, and it was extremely difficult to repair. But Sword Venerable Guanchong could not care so much at this moment, because the pressure on them from Lin Feng's primordial heaven opening technique was increasing. The power of the world created by the clear and the other turbid had already pressed down on the white hole above the 6th meridian immortal heaven sword formation. The other primordial spirit experts of the Shushan sword sect who had come along were watching the terrifying battle from afar. They were all shaken. They had not expected the 6th meridian immortal heavenly sword formation to be suppressed by Lin Feng. In the entire Mount Shu sword sect, other than the Great Mountain Guarding Formation and the Great Immortal Manifestation Sword Formation, the 6th Meridian Heavenly Immortal Sword Formation was the strongest killing formation. In the entire Heaven Primal world, it was also one of the few fearsome formations, but now it was about to be defeated. Swordsman Reaching Sky and Swordsman Mirrormoon were all seriously injured. Swordsman Guan Chong and the other 3 could only hold on bitterly. The dignified Shushan sword sect, with so many experts, was beaten to this point by one person alone. Sword Venerable Broken Mountain Ning Lang, who had narrowly escaped death and was now severely injured and weak, looked at Lin Feng in a daze. I actually provoked such a person time and time again? When Old Immortal Sword, Sword Reverend Flying Snow, Sword Reverend Sunlight, and the others saw this, they could not help but feel a chill down their spines. Mount Shu had come prepared this time. With a large army, it was almost as if they wanted to crush all the participants of this gathering with the strength of a single sect. But now, it was Lin Feng who had crushed all the Mount Shu cultivators present with his strength alone. One-on-one, ganging up on him, and finally forming a large formation to gang up on him. But it was all in vain. Against Lin Feng, who could take on a large formation with his bare hands, Mount Shu could only swallow the bitter pill of defeat. Seeing Lin Feng single-handedly suppress the 6th Meridian Heavenly Immortal Sword Formation formed by the 6 experts of Mount Shu, Old Immortal Sword and the others were in awe. 3rd tier Primordial Spirit Transformation Realm. Other than that, there is no other possibility. Ben Lazy turned to look at Old Immortal Sword. The Master of the Mystic Gate is definitely an expert no weaker than the Great Void's Yen Nanlai and Mount Shu's Xen Longsheng. Slowly, Old Immortal Sword nodded. Previously, when the Heavenly Sword Sect contacted the Thunderbolt Sword Sect, they had made many guesses about Lin Feng's cultivation. Initially, they thought that they had overestimated Lin Feng, who knew that in the end, they had still underestimated him. Sword Reverend Flying Snow and Sword Reverend Sunlight exchanged glances. Everything that has happened today must be reported to His Majesty, the Emperor of Qin. Everything that has happened in the past about Xianmen Tianzong must be re-evaluated. That's right. The comparison of strength between Xianmen Tianzong and Mount Shu Sword Sect must be adjusted. Not to mention his mountain sect and the many monstrous disciples under him, just the existence of the Master of the Mystic Gate alone is enough to make Xianmen Tianzong a top force that can fight against Mount Shu. Compared to the others who were overthinking things, Venerable Streamlight only felt his mind go blank. He was an extremely proud person. Because of the conflict between Xiao Yan and Murong Yanran, the Streamlight Sword Sect had lost a lot of face. Therefore, he had always hoped to have a battle with Lin Feng. Originally, he thought that he had kept a trump card. After breaking through to the 2nd tier of the Primordial Spirit Transformation Realm and reaching the Void Return Realm, he would be able to redeem himself. But now, it seemed like all of this was a joke. Such a huge difference made even Venerable Streamlight dazed for a moment. After a while, he came to his senses, laughed bitterly, and shook his head repeatedly. The thoughts of the people around him were undulating as their imaginations ran wild. Meanwhile, the 6 great sword cultivators of Mount Shu within the 6th Meridian Immortal Heaven Sword Formation were almost at the brink of life and death. After Venerable Guan Chong manifested his Void Return Realm dermic body, his entire body was trembling. At this moment, under the immense pressure, his Void Return Realm dermic body was directly crushed. For a 2nd tier Primordial Spirit Transformation Realm cultivator, The void return realm dermic body was the foundation of achieving Tao. And now, Venerable Guan Chang's void return realm dermic body was directly crushed under the pressure of Lin Feng's primordial heaven opening technique. Thousands of years of hard work had been destroyed in an instant. With the void return realm dermic body shattered, the cultivation level of a second-tier primordial spirit transformation realm cultivator would directly fall back to the first-tier primordial spirit transformation realm. Of the 6 meridian immortal heaven sword formation, Guan Chang's sword formation master, Venerable Guan Chong, had been instantly beaten back to the primordial spirit transformation realm by Lin Feng. And this was just the beginning. Very soon, Venerable Xiao Shang and the others were also forced to reveal their void return realm dermic bodies. The 6 meridian immortal heaven sword formation was in imminent danger. At this moment, a crack suddenly appeared in the void. A huge giant with white light flashing all over his body stepped out from within. The giant had the appearance of a middle-aged man. His face was fair and clean, and his facial features were ordinary. However, his vast sword made everyone look at him. This was a powerful concept that was not inferior to Lin Feng's primordial heaven opening technique. It was as if the heavens and earth had yet to be created, born from the primordial chaos. This sword would cleave the primordial chaos apart and create a new world. This was the concept possessed by the true immortal heaven sword Qi. Venerable Xiao Shang and the others had not truly cultivated the immortal heaven sword Qi and had only barely activated it through the combined power of the 6 meridians. At this moment, the white giant's energy waves were not as powerful as the 6 meridian immortal heaven sword formation, but it had truly grasped the essence of the immortal heaven sword Qi. Venerable Sun Luminary took a deep breath. It's Xn Longxing's thaumaturgy body, the immortal heaven sword sovereign. The white giant's facial features and appearance were none other than the current sect master of the Shu Mountain Sword Sect, a third-tier primordial spirit transformation cultivator, Xin Longxing. Just like how Lin Feng had used his great sun god fist and other thaumaturgy bodies to form the grand sun flame monarch, the one that had arrived was also one of Xin Longxing's thaumaturgy bodies. It was the Immortal Heaven Sword Sovereign formed from Immortal Heaven Sword Qi. The Immortal Heaven Sword Sovereign didn't say anything. His figure flashed and directly entered the white hole created by the 6 meridian Immortal Heaven Sword formation. The power of the white hole suddenly surged. A majestic Immortal Heaven Sword Sovereign shot out and resisted the power of Lin Feng's primordial heaven opening art. It was no longer a weak sword energy like a gentle breeze, but a majestic stream of stars. At this moment, the Immortal Heaven Sword Sovereign revealed its ferocious and domineering nature. The white hole created by the sword formation was unable to exert its full power. But now, with the Immortal Heaven Sword Sovereign leading it, it immediately became ferocious and murderous. It met attack with attack and blocked Lin Feng's primordial heaven opening art. Old Sword Immortal and the others became nervous. Even though it was only a thaumaturgy body, and not his real body, Xin Longxing still exerted great pressure on them. The sect master of Shu Mountain, a third-tier primordial spirit transformation cultivator, the number 1 sword Dao in the heaven primordial spirit transformation realm. Lin Feng looked at this scene, but he did not panic, instead he smiled slightly. Shu Shan sword Dao lives up to its name, it's just a pity. All the swords in the world come from Shu Mountain, but my sword is beyond the heavens. Lin Feng silently raised his right hand. His index and middle fingers formed a sword and pointed at the sky. A terrifying sword intent capable of destroying the world emerged. If there was life in the void, this sword would exterminate it. If there was life in the stars, this sword would exterminate it. If there was life in the earth, this sword would exterminate it. It wasn't targeted at a single living entity, but rather the entire grand Tao of heaven and earth, the world of creation, to be annihilated. It was different from Shu Mountain's sword Dao or any other killing sword in this world. It was a sword that could punish the heavens, a sword that could destroy the world. In Lin Feng's sea of knowledge, the heavenly virtue scripture visualized a good fortune bell. Its form rapidly changed, going through the life creation gate, the river of time, and the book of destruction. After the book of destruction, it reached its end and turned into nothingness. At this time, there was no need for the life creation gate, no need for the river of time, and no need for the book of destruction. All that was needed was destruction, extermination, to kill everything, to destroy everything into nothingness. The most terrifying power to destroy everything, to turn everything into nothingness, to cease to exist, to not leave a single trace. At the fingertips of Lin Feng's right hand, two streams of mana, one black and one white, continuously revolved, transforming into a yin and yang Tai Chi pattern. At the center of the Tai Chi pattern, a gray sword tip slowly rose up from within, bringing with it a power that made the world tremble. This is the sword intent that Lin Feng comprehended from that peerless, ominous sword. After fusing it with his own cultivation level and understanding of the Tao, this is a form of sword Tao that Lin Feng has mastered and mastered. Today is the first time it has appeared in the heaven primal world. What it challenges is the original number 1 sword Tao ability of the heaven primal world. This sword of mine is called the heaven punishing sword Qi. Please enlighten me, fellow Taoist Xin Longsheng. Lin Feng's tone was calm. His fingers moved, and a gray sword Qi shot towards the white hole formed by the 6 meridians Immortal Heaven sword formation. Your name is Immortal Heaven, my name is Heaven Punishing Sword. The gray sword Qi was extremely terrifying. Everywhere it passed, space was reduced to nothingness, no longer existing. The white hole let out an earth-shattering howl, and a violent Immortal Heaven sword Qi shot out from it. Like an enraged king, it did not retreat, and faced the challenge of the Heaven Punishing sword Qi head-on. Chapter 487. One gray and one white sword energy collided. The void violently twisted as if a hole had been created and the two sword energies poured into it. The hole exploded and countless sword energies flew in all directions, sweeping through all obstacles in their path. The void was connected to the distant universe, and countless small stars were destroyed and reduced to dust by the shockwaves of the immortal heavenly sword Qi and heaven punishing sword Qi. Even large and medium-sized stars were affected and shook violently. Be it venerable sword soaring snow, venerable sword luminary, or the other Shushan sword cultivators, all of them retreated rapidly. At the same time, they activated their sword will and spiritual power to protect themselves from being caught in the crossfire. Just the shockwaves from the collision are already so powerful. Immortal sword slowly nodded. Heavenly immortal sword energies, we finally have a worthy opponent. Ben Lazy grunted. From now on, Shu Mountain can no longer claim to be number 1 in the world in the way of the sword. As he spoke, the space at the center of the collision continued to distort and shatter. The terrifying gray sword energy once again poked its head out from the hole. It was Lin Feng's heaven-punishing sword energies. After resisting the heavenly immortal sword energies, the heaven-punishing sword energies still had some power left. It turned into a terrifying sword energy that continued forward. Under the horrified gazes of the Shushan crowd, the gray sword Qi slashed at the white hole and directly pierced through it. As if the world was collapsing, the white hole collapsed. Sword Venerable Little Shang and the others that formed the 6 meridian immortal sword formation all cried out in pain. Both the return to void Dharma physiques and primordial spirit avatars were cracking inch by inch. Light energy shot out continuously as if their flesh was spewing out blood. All 6 primordial spirit cultivators were gravely injured. The 6 meridian immortal sword formation that dominated the heavens' origin for countless years and caused countless experts to be alarmed was broken. the white hole shattered and the terrifying gray sword energy flashed in the air. It didn't dissipate and continued to slash down. With a flash of light, Sect Master Xian Longxing's avatar, the immortal Heaven Sword Sovereign, appeared in the air again. However, at this moment, the immortal Heaven Sword Sovereign was also weakened and on the verge of destruction. The immortal Heaven Sword Monarch's body turned into a vast expanse of white sword energy that enveloped Sword Venerable Little Shang's group of 6, as well as the other Shu Mountain cultivators. A supreme sword intent broke through the void, wanting to send everyone back to Shu Mountain. However, the heaven-punishing sword energy was too terrifying. It directly cut through the immortal Heaven Sword Monarch's body and cut him in half. This sword completely destroyed Xian Longxing's divine ability, Dharma body. The #1 holy land of swordsmanship in the world, Mount Shu Sword Sect, the dignified sect leader had his Dharmakaya destroyed. It was truly a great humiliation. Apart from the war between the two worlds, the number of times such a situation had happened since ancient times could be counted on one hand. What angered them even more was that the immortal Heaven Sword Monarch's avatar was destroyed and the spatial passage was about to close. All of them would be trapped here. At this moment, the void passageway that was about to close, on the other side of the passageway, a sword light suddenly appeared, opening up the passageway once again. Someone used powerful magic power to sweep up Sword Venerable Little Shang and the others, preparing to take them away. Lin Feng smiled faintly. Xian Longxing, I won't make things difficult for you if you take them away, not because they don't have a path of death, but rather because killing them would damage the overall strength of the human cultivation path, giving the demon race a free advantage. In the future, if we fight against the demon race, we will still need their help, so I will be lenient today. However, your Shu Mountain is too overbearing, wanting to leave without paying any price. How could it be so simple? Lin Feng's right hand slashed in the air, Heavenly Realm Barrier. Suddenly, the powerful Dharma power prohibition isolated the void. The sword light that Xian Longxing used to guide the people of Shu Mountain trembled violently and burst into countless streams of light. Within that stream of light there were two rays of light that were the most dazzling. Lin Feng changed the All-Celestial Realm Barrier spell into the All-Celestial Capture. Layers of spatial power transformed into a huge palm, forcefully capturing those two rays of light. After the light dissipated, the two things that were caught by the giant palm were two swords. One of them was 1 meter long and 1 foot wide. Its body was simple and dignified with an oval-shaped body like a pillar. There were no edges on either side, only a sharp tip. As for the other sword, only the hilt could be seen with the naked eye. Layers of mist floated above the hilt, making it difficult to grasp. Inside, one could vaguely see bright sword rays flashing in an ever-changing manner. These were the Yang Sword and Extreme Yin Sword of Shu Mountain's 6 Meridians immortal swords. These two swords were top-flying treasures, so how could they be captured by Lin Feng? They violently struggled, but Lin Feng calmly used the Heavenly Grand Capture to capture them. Then, he used his Heavenly Minor World technique to create a violet world and threw the two swords inside. Next, the Heaven-Bearer Seal's magical art activated and suppressed the two swords from 3 different directions. In the void, Xian Longxing's sword energy took Sword Venerable Little Shang's group away. Waves of sword energy condensed into a figure in the air, another immortal Heaven Sword Monarch. It had the same facial features as Xian Longxing. At this moment, it was expressionlessly looking at Lin Feng. Lin Feng's expression was indifferent as he calmly stared back at the immortal Heaven Sword Monarch. Sword Venerable Sun's group was far away and silently watched the two big shots. The atmosphere was so tense that it felt like it was about to freeze. What they had seen and heard today had a great impact on them. They were supposed to be facing Shu Mountain and were about to suffer a crushing defeat and lose face. Even Sword Venerable Flying Snow almost lost his life. But who knew that in the end, it would become a battle between Lin Feng and the Shushan sword sect? The result of the battle was even more shocking. With Lin Feng's strength alone, he turned the tide and defeated the people of Shushan. Sword Venerable Little Shang, Sword Venerable Guanchong, Sword Venerable Shaozi, Sword Venerable Li Meng, Sword Venerable Moonshine, Sword Venerable Towering Sky, and Sword Venerable Swordsman Ning Lang of Broken Mountain. The 7 experts were all seriously injured. Among them, Sword Venerable Guanchong had his return to void physique destroyed and his cultivation level dropped. The Shaoyang sword and the Taiyin sword, 2 of the 6 meridian immortal swords of Shushan, the legacy treasures of the Shaoyang and Taiyin sword lineages of the 6 meridian swords of Shushan, were also seized by Lin Feng. This was practically equivalent to breaking the foundation of the Shaoyang and Taiyin sword. How many years had it been since the Shu Mountain sword sect suffered such a great loss? If not for sect master Xian Longxing's timely arrival, the dozen or so Shushan sword cultivators at the primordial soul realm would have perished here. Among them were Sword Venerable Shaoshang and 4 other sword masters at the 2nd tier of the primordial soul realm. Even though the Mount Shu sword sect was a powerful sect, it could not afford such a loss. In today's battle, Lin Feng almost broke the backbone of the entire Shu Mountain. Xian Longxing's Immortal Heaven Sword Lord Avatar stared at Lin Feng expressionlessly and said slowly, "There is no need to say more. Lin Feng, I will leave the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords with you for now. Shu Mountain will soon take them back." Lin Feng chuckled and said calmly, "Why go through so much trouble? When I have time in the future, I will personally go to Shu Mountain and see the scenery of Western Shu. At that time, I will have to trouble fellow Taoist Xian Longxing to not reject me." Lin Feng's words naturally did not mean that he would voluntarily return the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords to their rightful owners and apologize. Old Sword Immortal and the others gasped in unison. This Taoist master of the Taoist gate meant that not only would he hand over the other party's immortal swords, he would also take the initiative to attack the other party's mountain? Didn't he know that there was one of the strongest spirit formations in the human world of the Divine Land, the Great Immortal Heaven Sword Formation? Didn't he know that there was the mountain treasure of Shu Mountain, the top killing treasure of the Divine Land, the Supreme Immortal Heaven Sword? Didn't he know that other than Xian Longxing, there was more than one Grand Supreme Elder of Shu Mountain at the 3rd tier of Primordial Spirit Realm who had always been in seclusion? Before this, the Taoist Gate Master seemed to have only relied on his own magic power and abilities to fight against Shu Mountain. Star Constellation Sword Venerable said slowly. He didn't use any magic treasures, not even his primordial spirit avatar. Sun Glory Sword Venerable and the others looked at each other. He still has that terrifying Jade Capital Mountain. At this point, they suddenly felt that Lin Feng's domineering presence at Shu Mountain was not that hard to imagine. However, the primordial spirit Sword Venerable felt a bit bitter in their mouth. So the Taoist Gate Master is actually this powerful? Xian Longxing's Immortal Heaven Sword Venerable stared at Lin Feng and slightly nodded. "I'm afraid I will be the first to go to Kunlun to find you. At that time, don't try to avoid me." With that, the Immortal Heaven Sword Venerable disappeared into the void. With the disappearance of the Immortal Heaven Sword Venerable's gigantic body, the battle finally came to an end. Old Sword Immortal and the rest felt a little more relaxed. The 4 sword masters of the Shushan sword sect, and even the sect leader Xian Longxing, who had appeared at the end, had given them too much pressure. But while they were relaxed, they were also a little disappointed. It's a pity that Xian Longxing himself seems to be busy and could only come here with his sword will avatar. Exalted Sword Luminary thought, otherwise we would be fortunate enough to witness a true pinnacle of sword arts. Not only him, but everyone else also had the same thought. However, they quickly calmed down and went up to greet Lin Feng. Although they didn't say it out loud, they all expressed their gratitude. It was the same for Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow and Venerable Sun Luminary. Especially Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow. If not for Lin Feng appearing in time, with Venerable Swordsman Li's ferocious nature, he would have definitely chased after Venerable Swordsman Flying Snow until he died. However, the two of them didn't feel good. This gathering was clearly led by the Qin dynasty, but it ended anticlimactic. They were almost humiliated by the Shu Mountain Sword Sect's army. In the end, they managed to regain their face, but it was Lin Feng who acted as a guest. This made the two of them feel ashamed. No matter what, I have to report everything that happened today. Sword Venerable Flying Snow's thought was also the most urgent thought in everyone's mind. Very soon, the process and results of this battle were reported to the participating forces at the first possible moment, and all the major forces fell into shock and silence. At the northern part of the Qin dynasty's capital, Western Tomb City, the door to Prime Minister Wu Qingrou's study was currently closed. Wu Qingrou's confidants all knew that only when Wu Qingrou encountered a headache that he couldn't make a decision on would he close the door and stay in the study alone. This was extremely rare, and this time the door was closed for an unprecedentedly long time. Chapter 488. The door to Wu Qingrou's study was closed. The master was alone in the study. Silently, a young man stood outside the study, waiting patiently. He knew that Wu Qingrou needed time to think. I thought it would be a draw. Who knew that Shu Mountain would suffer a crushing defeat? The young man knew why Wu Qingrou was deep in thought. It was because of the news he brought. In fact, the young man was shocked when he first received the news. It wasn't that he didn't think that Lin Feng could win, but he didn't expect the situation to be completely one-sided. After a long time, the door suddenly opened. Wu Qingrou's calm voice came from inside. "Come in, Yuyan." The young man walked into the room and saw Wu Qingrou sitting behind the desk. His expression was as calm as water, and his eyes were like the deep sea. "Eldest senior brother, the situation seems to be a bit unexpected." The young man, Huang Yuyan, deliberated over his words and said slowly, "Although Xian Longxing didn't show up in person, and the old monsters of Mount Shu didn't come out of seclusion, 4 of the 5 great sword masters were defeated. Even the 6th meridian immortal heaven sword formation was broken. If not for the master of the celestial gate showing mercy, they would all have died there. Even so, Sword Venerate Guanchang's return to void Dharma body shattered, his cultivation regressed, and even the Shaoyang sword and Taiyin sword were taken." Huang Yuyan sighed softly. Although Shu Mountain lost more than one primordial spirit cultivator, including Sword Venerate Taiyin, in the war of vanquishing Buddhism, the Tempest Monastery was still destroyed. This time, they returned in a terrible defeat. Since the war between the two worlds 4,000 years ago, Shu Mountain has never suffered such a great loss. Wu Qingrou smiled. It was indeed unexpected. The change this time was beyond my expectations. He looked at the pond in the distance outside the window of the study. Watching the ripples on the water, he said leisurely, "Speaking of which, this master of the celestial sect of wonders always surprises people. It's hard to see through him." He tapped his fingers on the table and said calmly, "Stop all activities against Shu Mountain. Put all the previous arrangements into hibernation." Wu Qingrou looked at Huang Yuyan and said, "Especially the arrangements against the Zhou dynasty and Shu Mountain." "Oh right, I remember that the operation against the 4th prince of the great Zhou dynasty, Liang Qian, seemed to be unusual? Half a year ago, the original plan was to kill the 4th prince of the great Zhou dynasty, Liang Qian, at the southern foot of Kunlun Mountain. However, eldest senior brother instructed us to postpone the plan, so we didn't carry it out." Huang Yuyan nodded. "But the other party seems to have sensed some movements and realized something." Wu Qingrou smiled. "Beyond Heaven Mountain's move might have been exposed." Looks like Liang Qian's subordinates have sharp eyes. Then let's just leave it hanging like this. It'll be more of a deterrent when it's about to be unleashed, and it can also serve as a cover for other arrangements. Huang Yuan asked, does eldest senior brother mean to not lead the great Zhou dynasty into a conflict with the Shushan sword sect and let Xianmen Tianzong face the Shushan sword sect alone? Wu Qingru let out a rare sigh and shook his head. My previous judgment was wrong. I thought that Xianmen Tianzong was under too much pressure, so I planned to suppress the Shushan sword sect first and force them to settle down for a while without affecting the overall situation. But now, it seems that if we follow the original plan, Xianmen Tianzong, the Qin dynasty, and the Zhou dynasty will join forces to attack Shu, the Shushan sword sect will be under too much pressure. Wu Qingru tapped his fingers on the table and suddenly smiled. Interesting. This is the second time I've changed my original plan because of Xianmen Tianzong. It's stupid to change my mind all the time, but I have no choice but to do it now. The master of the Taoist sect is indeed not simple. He stood up and walked out of the study. Yuyan, go and make the arrangements. I still have to meet the Qin emperor. Huang Yuyan nodded and sighed. I thought that after the fall of the Tempest Temple, the reincarnation sect would be the most likely to fill the vacancy of the three holy lands. But based on the current situation, it seems that Xianmen Tianzong, which has been established for less than a year, is more powerful. Wu Qingru smiled faintly. Maybe it is, but we don't know for sure. But in the history of the Tianyuan world, there have been many amazing figures who eventually withered and disappeared. Is Xianmen Tianzong an eternal star or an instant meteor? It's still too early to make a conclusion. He put his hands behind his back and walked out of the study. Facing the faint light of dawn, he squinted and smiled. Shushan has a good opponent now. The battle where Lin Feng broke the 6 meridians heavenly immortal sword formation of Shushan shocked the world. If people had only seen Lin Feng as a rising star before, then this battle had completely established his position as a giant in the divine land. After countless powers recovered from their shock, they all began to analyze the process of this battle, and at the same time analyze the effects of this battle. The battle between the Shushan sword sect and Xianmen Tianzong has already reached the point where one side must die. Within the imperial city of the great Zhou dynasty, within the imperial palace, Emperor of Zhou sat cross-legged on the dragon throne. Slowly, he said, not to mention the fact that the reputation of the Shushan sword sect has been heavily damaged after this battle, just the fact that Lin Feng took away the Shaoyang and Tainan swords is enough for Shushan to not let the matter rest. Within the imperial palace, the Marquis of Xuanji Zhu Hongwu replied silently, Your Majesty is wise, the people of Shushan are used to being arrogant. Blindly attacking Xian Longxing and the few great elders while they were in closed-door training, this defeat is not undeserved. In front of Zhu Hongwu stood a green-clothed girl. It was precisely Yan Mingyue. She sighed lightly. It's a pity that Xian Longxing's illustrious name was destroyed in a single day, having his divine ability and Dharma body destroyed by the master of Xian Gate. He won't be able to take revenge in a short period of time and redeem his faith. For this kind of matter, if he can't get back at them on the spot, as time drags on, even if Xian Longxing wins the battle against Lin Feng in the future, he will still lose a lot of face. Liang Pan looked towards Zhu Hongwu, smiling slightly. However, the strength of this master of Xian Gate is truly beyond imagination. It seems like he won't be obediently killed by just 3 to 5 primordial spirit realm cultivators surrounding him. Unless these 3 to 5 primordial spirit realm cultivators are all strong practitioners like Xian Longxing. This was his idea of teasing Zhu Hongwu in the past. In the entire Great Zhou dynasty, perhaps only Liang Pan could tease his trusted official like this. Zhu Hongwu's expression did not change. Your Majesty is right, But even someone as strong as Yudu of the Tianhai Yudu ended up dying in the past. No matter who it is, if they stand in the way of the general trend, they will definitely end up with their bodies crushed. The master of Xian Gate, Lin Feng, should first prove that he can defeat Xian Longsheng. Even though the 6 meridians heavenly sword formation of Shushan is strong, it is not invincible. Furthermore, the 6 meridians heavenly sword formation in this battle is not his peak condition. Liang Pan and Yan Mingyue both smiled slightly. What Zhu Hongwu said just now was not wrong. The 6 meridians heavenly sword formation of Shushan's sword sect, in theory, was naturally the formation set up by 6 great sword cultivators of the 3rd tier of the primordial spirit realm. Its power was the greatest. That was also the most glorious moment in the history of Shushan sword sect. 6 strong practitioners of the primordial spirit realm had set up the 6 meridians heavenly sword formation and rampaged through the great heaven primordial world. Gods and Buddhas had to flee, establishing the position of Shushan's sword sect as one of the 3 holy lands of the divine land. But as the world changed, some of the 6 great practitioners of the primordial spirit realm died, and some went missing. 4 tens of thousands of years after that, Shushan never had 6 great sword cultivators of the primordial spirit realm at the same time. The strongest 6 meridians heavenly sword formation thus became a lost song. After that, generally speaking, it was more common for 6 mighty practitioners of the 2nd tier of the primordial spirit realm to set up a sword formation. This meant that the 6 great sword masters of Shushan's 6 meridians sword formation would set up the formation. At the same time, they would be paired with the Shaoyang sword, Taiyin sword, and other 6 meridians immortal swords. When 6 people and 6 swords worked together, they would obtain an extremely powerful killing power. They were invincible against those below the 3rd tier of the primordial spirit realm, and could even kill experts of the primordial spirit realm. They could even put up a fight against elite 3rd tier primordial spirit realm bulls like Yan Nanlai and Xian Longsheng. They were truly ferocious beyond compare. But in this battle with Lin Feng, the Taiyin Sword Lord had already fallen, the Shaoyang Sword Lord had remained in Shushan, and the Shaoshang Sword Lord and the other 3 did not bring the Shaoshang, Shaozi, Guanchong, and Lixiong swords. The power of the 6 meridians heavenly sword formation had been greatly reduced. It was only after Xian Longsheng's immortal heaven sword Lord Dharma body had arrived that it showed some of its power. And now, even if Shushan made a comeback, Sword Venerable Moonshine had advanced to the 2nd tier of the primordial spirit realm, and Sword Venerable Guanchong had ascended to the primordial spirit realm. The 6 meridians heavenly sword formation would still be incomplete. This was because the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords had already fallen into Lin Feng's hands. Shushan's recklessness this time had caused them to lose far more than what they seemed on the surface. Silently, Zhu Hongwu said, "But this way, the great Qin dynasty might change course." Emperor Liang Pan of Zhou smiled. "That is to be expected. But there are some things that the great Qin dynasty is already like an arrow knocked on a bow. It has to be fired." He turned to Yan Mingyue. "Fairy Yan, there are some things that I will leave to you." Yan Mingyue lightly tucked her hair behind her ear and smiled. "It is already a matter of course. But seeing the outcome of this battle, Mingyue feels a little regretful." Liang Pan laughed heartily. "Fairy Yan must be joking. The ones who should be regretting are the others. Just as we have said, there are many things that are like an arrow knocked on a bow. It has to be fired. There is no room for regret." The others were constantly planning and plotting. Even though he did not know what they were thinking, Lin Feng knew in his heart that after this battle, his position in the human cultivation world of the divine continent would be completely different. He did not even need to check his reputation in the system. Just by looking at Old Sword Immortal, Sword Venerable Flying Snow, and the others, he could see the obvious change in their attitude. It was not that they had changed from arrogance to deference, nor were they friendly. On the contrary, the attitude of Old Sword Immortal and the others towards Lin Feng was clearly more reserved and courteous than before. It was not that they were estranged, but that they respected an expert. This was the same attitude they had towards Taishu Temple Master Yan Nanlai, Shushan Sect Master Xian Longxing, Emperor Qin Shiyu, Emperor Zhou Pan, and other major figures. Lin Feng's expression did not change at all. He was still chatting happily with the others. But at this moment, he had naturally become the center of attention. The major factions all expressed their goodwill towards Lin Feng. Old Sword Immortal of the Heavenly Sword Sect even extended an invitation to Lin Feng, hoping that Lin Feng would come to Tongtian Mountain as a guest. Chapter 489. Inviting Lin Feng to his sect as a guest, the Old Sword Immortal was actually sighing in his heart. Among the great powers of the human cultivation world in the Divine Land, the one who had the closest relationship with Xianmen Tianzong was the Purple Cloud Dao. That was during the Desolate Sea Assembly, when Lin Feng established a friendship with the big shot of the Purple Cloud Dao, Lord Blue Thunder. After Xianmen Tianzong dominated the Kunlun mountain range, the Purple Cloud Dao was the first to congratulate him, so the relationship between the two sides became closer. But in fact, long before Xianmen Tianzong opened his sect, the Heavenly Sword Sect had already been in contact with Xianmen Tianzong. It was a pity that there was no further development, so the two sides gradually became estranged. At this moment, the Old Sword Immortal was trying his best to make up for his previous mistake. Lin Feng did not mind this. It was not a bad thing to unite allies. Not only the Heavenly Sword Sect, but the other sects also did not discriminate and accepted the goodwill expressed by the other party. In the end, everyone chatted happily and bid farewell to each other. Lin Feng smiled and said, "Fellow Taoists, we will meet again." After saying this, he turned into a ray of light and broke through the void and left. After everyone watched him leave, the venue was silent for a moment. Everyone's thoughts were fluctuating, and countless thoughts flashed through their minds. The flying snow sword Venerable and the glorious sun sword Venerable looked at each other and sighed softly. They had the same thought in their minds. After being disturbed by the Shushan sword sect, the alliance meeting was originally ruined, but the Xianmen sect master's action strengthened everyone's confidence in continuing to fight against Shushan. It's just that before the gathering, the source of this confidence was the great Qin dynasty, but after the gathering, it became Xianmen Tianzong. This result was also within Lin Feng's expectations. However, he thought a level deeper. Haha, is this another thank you gift from Emperor Qin Stonefeather to me? Or is it a test? But he probably did not expect the final outcome to be like this. After the people from Shushan arrived, the great Qin dynasty could actually rush to support, but in the end, they chose to remain silent and let Lin Feng take action. However, Stonefeather did not expect that Lin Feng would be able to defeat the invading enemies of Mount Shu in an extremely short period of time. In the end, other than losing face for Shu Mountain, the prestige of the great Qin dynasty was also damaged. After weighing the pros and cons, Stonefeather ultimately chose to remain silent. Although it would damage the prestige of the great Qin dynasty, he would completely transfer the pressure of the Mount Shu sword sect to Xianmen Tianzong. He would retreat behind the scenes and free up his hands to clean up the aristocratic families within the country. The gains and losses are like drinking water, only one knows whether it is hot or cold. Stonefeather believed that Lin Feng would be able to clearly see the relationship between them. In this way, it would be equivalent to selling a favor to Xianmen Tianzong in a disguised form, and the two of them would form an additional layer of good karma. Lin Feng was in the void, traversing through space. As he walked, he pondered. A faint smile appeared on his lips. If you want to take something, you must first give it. Stonefeather understands this logic very well. His consciousness entered the system and checked his reputation. Then, he discovered that his reputation points around the world had all broken through 80. Even if some places did not reach 80 currently, their potential had reached 80. As time passed, the influence of the battle with Mount Shu would continue to ferment. The potential reputation points of these places would eventually all be converted into true reputation points. For Lin Feng, the greatest gain from this battle was the soaring reputation points. He had single-handedly defeated a group of primordial spirit sword cultivators from Mount Shu, broken the 6 meridian heavenly sword formation, slain Xian Longxing's mystique Dharmakaya, and seized the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords. Any one of these could make Lin Feng's name resound throughout the divine continent. And now that all these things were gathered together, it immediately caused Lin Feng's personal reputation to soar. He had officially become a major figure on the same level as Yan Nanlai, Xian Longxing, and the others. My personal reputation points are already a lot more than the previous requirement of 80, but Lin Feng looked at the reputation points in the system and frowned slightly. But the overall reputation of the sect is still a little lacking. After this battle, Lin Feng's personal reputation points, no matter in the region, had already exceeded 80. In some places it had even exceeded 90. He had already completely fulfilled the requirements of the system's mission. The overall reputation of Xianmen Tianzong had also reached 80 in most regions, but in some places, it was a little lacking. The lowest region was only 70. After today's battle, Lin Feng's name had completely shaken the world. Naturally, the reputation of Xianmen Tianzong that he had founded had also risen along with it. But compared to his own personal reputation, it was still somewhat lacking. After all, personal reputation and the overall reputation of the sect could not be completely equated. In the history of the great heaven primordial world, there had been powerful loose cultivators who had written resplendent chapters that shone brilliantly. Even the 3 holy lands had to give way to them. But in the end, the orthodoxy that they had left behind had not been able to develop and grow, nor had they left behind any reputation. When people mentioned such sects, they would only say that they were the orthodoxy inheritances left behind by some powerful person. Lin Feng recalled the time when the overall reputation of the sect had greatly increased in the past. He had a rough idea in his heart. My personal reputation has a certain impact, but the disciples of the sect have made a name for themselves. The impact on the overall reputation of the sect is even more obvious. Thinking of this, Lin Feng smiled. It's about time for the few brats of my family to mature. For example, Shi Tianhao and the others, their own paths of destiny had already gradually opened. They had written their own legends, stepped onto their own stage, and emitted a brilliance that attracted the attention of the world. Lin Feng suddenly laughed a little unscrupulously. Mount Shu Sword Sect, why do you think I spared you this time? I'm familiar with the self-cultivation of directors and scriptwriters. Of course, I remember that on the most dazzling and grandest stage, other than the main character, there must also be enough supporting characters. But this time, I still have to thank you for your warmth. Unlike the others who were only guessing, Lin Feng had a much clearer understanding of the gains and losses of this battle. Aside from the great reputation, Lin Feng also had many other gains. He flipped his palm and a sharp sword energy struggled inside a cloud of violet energy. This was a strand of sword energy that Lin Feng had captured after killing Xian Longxing's Immortal Heaven Sword Sovereign Avatar. This sword energy was extremely ferocious. Even with Lin Feng's magic power, he couldn't restrain it. It was possible to kill it, but it was very difficult to restrain it for a long time without destroying it. However, Lin Feng didn't plan to keep it. After returning to Jade Capital Mountain, he directly sent it into the Black Heaven Time Light Grotto. There, the giant sword box was the true home of this sword energy. With this sword energy, the refinement of the ominous sword would be much faster. In fact, Lin Feng was well aware that Xian Longxing might have the same idea. He was trying to comprehend the ominous sword's sword intent to improve Shu Mountain's sword Dao. Xian Longxing of Shushan was in seclusion and did not come out. It looked like he could only lead the revered swordsman of Little Shang and the others back in a sorry state. He even had his Dharmakaya destroyed. Although it was shameful, he had personally experienced the heaven-punishing sword Qi. It was more or less beneficial for him to study the sword will of the ominous sword. Unfortunately, he didn't actually obtain this peerless ominous sword. With Xian Longxing's sword Dao cultivation, just touching the heaven-punishing sword energy was like scratching an itch through his boots. It didn't help much and instead made him yearn for Lin Feng's ominous sword even more. Lin Feng was different. He didn't expect to learn Shu Mountain's heaven-punishing sword energy. He only wanted to use this supreme sword Dao to help him sharpen his sword. While advancing and retreating, he gained some benefit. It was just that outsiders wouldn't know of these gains. However, Lin Feng was increasingly looking forward to the day when this peerless ominous sword would truly appear. As he pondered, Lin Feng felt the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords he had also suppressed trembling, trying to break free. Lin Feng's consciousness swept over and saw a figure appear beside the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords. They weren't illusory, but real bodies formed from sword intent and sword qi. They were the sword spirits of the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords. The Shaoyang sword spirit was a dignified and steady middle-aged man. He wore a wide robe and had 3 strands of black beard. His expression was calm and dignified. The Taiyin sword spirit was a woman. She had a beautiful face and a cold demeanor. Her temperament was unpredictable. The 2 sword spirits formed a sword seal together. Sword Qi soared into the sky, resisting the yellow light above their heads. The yellow light was as heavy as the earth. It was the power of Lin Feng's heaven mandate seal that was suppressing them. Other than the yellow light, there were countless layers of space folded together, forming a sparkling crystal wall-like barrier that formed the second layer of seal. Above the crystal wall, the small world formed by the mass of purple gas was the third layer of seal. As if realizing that Lin Feng was looking at them, the 2 sword spirits looked over and met Lin Feng's gaze. The Shaoyang sword spirit said in a low voice, "Are you the master of the Celestial Gate? Holding me and Taiyin here is too rash. You have bullied Shu Mountain too much." Lin Feng's calm and composed voice quietly echoed in the small world of heavens. Those who humiliate others will always be humiliated by others. You have met with this calamity today only because your Shushan has brought it upon yourselves. The Shaoyang sword spirit was silent for a moment. He was a sword spirit, and his personality was of the same origin as the sword Dao of the Shaoyang sword. He had always been calm and dignified. Even the sword master of Shu Mountain's Shaoyang sword sect, Sword Venerable Shaoyang, was the most composed and kind among the 6 sword masters. The Sword Venerable Shaoyang didn't leave Shu Mountain this time because his sect master and grand elders were in seclusion, so the sect needed someone to manage the situation. On the other hand, he didn't like Shu Mountain's operation this time. Thus, he stayed at Shu Mountain and didn't participate. However, since it was the sect's decision, he didn't oppose it. The Shaoyang sword sect also sent Sword Venerable Sky-Reaching Sword. The Sword Venerable Shaoshang and the others expected to use the 6 Meridian Immortal Heaven sword formation to deal with Lin Feng, so the Sword Venerable Shaoyang tacitly allowed him to bring the Shaoyang sword away. Unexpectedly, Lin Feng was too ferocious and defeated the 6 Meridian Immortal Heaven sword formation. Xian Longxing was in seclusion and sent the Immortal Heaven Sword Monarch's avatar, but it couldn't do anything to Lin Feng. Instead, the Shaoyang sword and Taiyin sword were taken away. The Taiyin sword spirit's eyes were cold as he said indifferently, "Shaoyang, what's the point of saying so much? It's just that the winner takes all and the loser takes all. but don't even think about making us wait helplessly for death." While speaking, her entire person merged into one with the moon sword, turning into clouds and mist, continuously moving about and attacking Lin Feng's mana seal. The Shaoyang sword spirit sighed and disappeared as well. She fused with the Shaoyang sword and turned into a golden light that soared into the sky, creating an attack even more powerful than the Taiyin sword. Seeing this, Lin Feng smiled. Both of them are peak incarnation level magic treasures. They are indeed quite energetic. Chapter 490. The Shaoyang sword's bright golden sword gleam was like a pillar that held up the sky, forcefully withstanding the suppression of Lin Feng's heaven-bearing seal. And the lunar sword turned into clouds of mist, twining around the golden sword aura, continuously stimulating the golden sword aura and assisting it wholeheartedly, causing the Shaoyang sword's sword aura to become stronger and stronger, attempting to break through Lin Feng's mana seal. Lin Feng looked at this scene with interest, and then increased the pressure on the heaven-bearing seal a bit more. At the same time, the power of the All Heavens capture was added, suppressing the Shaoyang sword and the Taiyin sword. Feeling the increasing pressure, the two swords changed their way of fighting. The golden sword gleam suddenly disappeared, completely merging into the clouds. Changing from the previous lesser yang as the main and lunar as the support mode to the lunar sword acting as the main force to deal with Lin Feng's mana, while the lesser yang sword is hidden in the mist formed by the lunar sword, continuously using its own sword energy spirit energy to support it. The two swords no longer fought head-on, instead using the Taiyin sword's ever-changing sword intent to deal with Lin Feng, hoping to use softness to overcome hardness. Yes, both swords are transformation-grade Dharma treasures, and they have reached the peak of transformation, only one step away from the Mahayana realm. Lin Feng had a plan. The remaining 4-6 Meridian immortal swords of Mount Shu should be of the same level. Just like how cultivators cultivated and improved their realm, Dharma treasures also had their own realms. Dharma treasures had 4 realms, from low to high, namely spirit-bearing, transformation, Mahayana, and creation. The first realm was called spirit-bearing, which meant nurturing a primordial spirit, giving birth to a Dharma treasure's primordial spirit. Its consciousness would constantly grow, from a simple, chaotic thought to a complete independent thought and self-awareness. Furthermore, the primordial spirit could absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, constantly increasing its magic power, just like a human cultivating. However, spirit-bearing grade Dharma treasures could not form their own spiritual body, their consciousness completely dependent on the body of the Dharma treasure. Cultivation required the master's help, which would allow the treasure's power to grow rapidly. Self-cultivation would be very slow. If the magic treasure were to advance to the second stage of the incarnation realm, then the situation would be different. The magic treasure's original spirit would condense its own form and could temporarily leave the magic treasure's body. In this way, the magic treasure's original spirit could cultivate normally without the need of the master's sacrificial refining, and its strength could also increase rapidly. Generally speaking, the power of a magic treasure depended on the cultivation of the refiner. Spirit nurturing grade was equivalent to the refiner's first-tier primordial spirit incarnation stage strength, while transformation grade was equivalent to the second-tier primordial spirit reversion stage. Mahayana grade magic treasures were equivalent to the third-tier primordial spirit convergence stage. However, there was a problem, and that was that spirit nurturing grade and transformation grade treasures could not unleash their full power on their own. They had to be controlled by a primordial spirit powerhouse of the same level in order to unleash 100% of their power. In the battle before the opening ceremony of the Sand Continent City, Pang Jie had wielded the hexagonal sword of the Taishu Temple. Because Pang Jie had not attained the nascent divinity, the hexagonal sword had not been able to display its full power during the battle. Although it was far more powerful than ordinary Yuanian-grade magic treasures, it was not the power that a magic treasure should have. If it had been in the hands of Yan Mingwei, who had attained the primordial spirit stage back then, the power of the hexagonal sword would have been equivalent to that of a first-tier primordial spirit stage powerhouse. By the same logic, during the Battle of Kunlun Mountain, the Yu family's patriarch, Lord Xianming Yuxintao, had wielded the Xianming treasure book, the Yu family heirloom, to fight against Lin Feng. The Xianming treasure book was a transformation-grade magic treasure, but because Yuxintao was only at the first-tier primordial spirit incarnation stage and had yet to attain the void reversion stage, the power that the Xianming treasure book could unleash was only at the spirit nurturing grade. During the Desolate Sea Assembly, the great Qin dynasty's Prince Anliang Shi Zongyue had wielded the transformation-grade magic treasure, the Hidden Dragon Kettle, with his second-tier primordial spirit reversion stage cultivation. At the moment, the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords that Lin Feng was wielding were both transformation-grade magic treasures. Moreover, they were both at the peak of the transformation grade. They were only a step away from reaching the next level. However, such a short distance was like the distance between heaven and earth. If no one wielded them, they would not be able to unleash their full power. Magic treasures needed to advance to the third-tier realm, the Mahayana grade. Only then would the primordial spirit be fully developed. It would then be able to separate from the body and control the body independently. It would be able to unleash its full power independently and do as it pleased. The combat power of a Mahayana-grade magic treasure was completely equivalent to that of a third-tier primordial spirit incarnation stage almighty expert. At this stage, the magic treasure's primordial spirit could even choose to transcend the tribulation and reincarnate as a real living being. It would be born and grow, becoming a truly independent, brand-new life in the vast thousand domains. The primordial spirit transcended the tribulation and reincarnated, severing the connection between it and the original owner of the sacrificial vessel. However, the primordial spirit that transcended the tribulation and reincarnated would also completely sever the connection between it and the body of the magic treasure, forever losing the chance to become a creation treasure. After reincarnation, everything was unknown. Although it was much easier to cultivate the primordial spirit of a magic treasure compared to ordinary living beings, it was completely unknown whether it could become a primordial spirit and ascend to the realm of carefree immortality. Therefore, generally speaking, the primordial spirit of a magic treasure would not take the initiative to reincarnate. A magic treasure that had lost its origin spirit had a certain chance of giving birth to a new origin spirit. It wasn't a replication. The relationship between a new magic treasure's origin spirit and the original origin spirit was similar to that of a child and a parent. As for the fourth realm of magic treasures, which was also the highest realm, the creation realm, it was much more mysterious. In the entire history of the heaven primal world, only a few creation treasures had appeared. When a Dharma treasure advanced to the creation realm, its origin spirit would lose its previous form. Instead, it would gradually transform into an existence that resembled the will of the creation realm and would not appear often. Regarding the treasure of creation, the Buddhist Great Lane Temple had proposed a concept in the past. It was known as the Nirvana Talisman, implying that the sea of bitterness was boundless. With the Nirvana Talisman, people could cross the sea of bitterness and reach the shore. Between life and death, there was great terror. Without becoming a primordial spirit, one's lifespan was limited. There would come a day when one would reach the end. When humans achieved the primordial soul realm and demons cultivated the immortal demon soul, they could live as long as the heavens and earth. Naturally, their lifespans were almost infinite. As long as the heavens and earth were not destroyed, they would not die. But what if this part of the world, this part of the vast thousand worlds, was completely destroyed? For a primordial spirit powerhouse, other than being killed by external forces, the only natural way to die was to follow the world to the nirvana. The nirvana of heaven and earth was a greater terror than life and death. Those who lived as long as the heavens and earth would naturally reach the end of their lifespans as well. When the nest was overturned, there would be no eggs left intact. Birth, old age, sickness, death, success, failure, and emptiness. Creation was a cycle between birth and death. A place of creation would open up, develop, and eventually decline until it was destroyed, returning to nothingness. Then, it would be reborn from nothingness. And according to legend, the treasure of creation was a supreme treasure that had the hope of resisting the nirvana of heaven and earth. It helped people traverse countless eras and break through the nirvana of heaven and earth to walk towards a new life. However, the treasure of creation rarely appeared in the world. In the great heaven primordial world, it had gradually become a legendary existence. It was extremely difficult for an artifact to become a treasure of creation. In the history of the great heaven primordial world, the treasures of creation that were recorded in the history of the great heaven primordial world all required a certain amount of luck in order to cross the threshold that was like a natural chasm. This natural chasm was not only difficult to refine, but also almost insurmountable in terms of power. However, among the three grades of spirit conception, transformation, and Mahayana, there were existences that were inferior to the superior ones. Between different artifacts, there were also differences in strength. There were many factors that determined which was superior, such as the level of the refiner's cultivation, the quality of the Taoist techniques that the refiner cultivated, the quality of the materials and refinement conditions, and so on. Apart from these conditions, there was also the factor of luck. Some artifacts, although only at the spirit conception level, could be stronger than transformation-level artifacts, and could even challenge Mahayana artifacts. This was similar to how some cultivators could fight above their level because of their powerful dharmic powers, or because of their extraordinary talent. For example, Lin Feng's enlightened artifact, the Bell of Creation, had now refined the first manifestation, known as the Life Creation Gate. At this moment, it was a spirit conception-level artifact, and had just developed a spiritual consciousness. However, it was still like a baby and needed to continue nurturing and growing. However, although it was only at the spirit conception level, Lin Feng already had a rough estimate of the power of the Life Creation Gate. It was far superior to ordinary spirit conception artifact. And the two swords of Shaoyang and Taiyin that Lin Feng was currently messing around with were also the cream of the crop among the magic treasures of the incarnation level. Furthermore, they had both reached the peak of the incarnation level and were only one step away from the Mahayana realm. As swords, they were sharp and powerful. If they were controlled by a second or third tier essence soul realm expert and unleashed their full power, they could even fight against a Mahayana artifact. However, due to the inherent weakness of transformation-level artifacts, they could not unleash their full power. It was effortless for Lin Feng to suppress them. Facing the Shaoyang and Taiyin swords that were trying to escape, Lin Feng smiled slightly. Surging dharmic powers rushed into the small world of heavens and directly turned into two purple hands. One hand grabbed the cloud mist that the Taiyin sword had transformed into, while the other hand slapped. A golden light was shaken out of the cloud mist. It was the Shaoyang sword. The Shaoyang sword turned back into a giant sword that was 10 feet long and had no edge. Under the suppression of Lin Feng's dharmic powers, the Taiyin sword also turned back into its original form. The two swords were grabbed by Lin Feng. The huge power made them tremble continuously, but they could not escape. 10,000 years of hard work will be wasted in a day. I don't want that. You two should respect yourselves. Lin Feng said lightly. I don't covet the two of you to work for me, Xianmen Tianzong. However, if you want to cause trouble, I don't mind shattering your primordial spirit. The Taiyin sword was the first to calm down. A cold thought came from the blade. All right, I'll wait to see you perish under my Shushan sword. On the other hand, the Shaoyang sword refused to give in even though its attitude was more peaceful at the beginning. It persisted in resisting. The Taiyin sword sent a message to him. If you perish here, the Shaoyang sword lineage will be greatly weakened. My Shushan 6 Meridian's heavenly immortal sword formation will also collapse. Keep yourself alive. When he comes to Shushan to seek revenge from the Xianmen sect's master, we can cooperate with him from the inside. Chapter 491. Unlike the lunar sword, the Shaoyang sword remained silent, but its confrontation with Lin Feng did not stop. Instead, it intensified. A person who was usually peaceful would appear especially stubborn in certain areas. In a sense, you are no different from a real human. Lin Feng laughed inwardly. A pity that stubbornness is useless against me. If you were a Mahayana-grade Dharma treasure, you might be able to cause a few waves, but an ownerless Dharma treasure better not jump around. Without even looking, Lin Feng opened his left hand and released another wave of spiritual power. It condensed into a huge purple hand that grabbed the Shaoyang sword and gripped it tightly. The golden sword light that had been flickering on the sword was instantly extinguished. The Shaoyang sword let out a piercing sound that made one's teeth ache, as if it was wailing. Lin Feng said indifferently, "I will not make things difficult for you. Just stay put." The Shaoyang sword was completely restrained by Lin Feng's spiritual power and could not break free. Although the sword spirit still transmitted an unyielding will, it could only helplessly be suppressed by Lin Feng. On the other side, the lunar sword was also suppressed by Lin Feng. The two swords were sent into the Black Heavens Time Light Cave by Lin Feng, and they were suppressed under the huge sword case along with the remnant soul of the Golden Crow Great Sage. The huge sword case vibrated, and a terrifying aura spread out, causing the Shaoyang sword and the lunar sword to tremble. They were both swords that had given birth to primordial spirit. They had a deeper understanding of the power of the peerless sword sealed within the sword case. They could clearly sense how terrifying it was. After putting away the two Dharma treasures, Lin Feng thought for a moment. Yes, I've made a mortal enemy of the Shushan sword sect this time. Almost all the Shushan second-tier primordial spirit realm cultivators have been heavily injured by me. Without the Shaoyang and lunar swords, the power of the 6 Meridian heavenly sword formation has been greatly reduced. The overall strength of the Shushan sword sect has been damaged, and they should be in a defensive state to prevent others from taking advantage of the situation. Logically speaking, the Mount Shu sword sect should not take the initiative to attack at this moment, but it is hard to guarantee that Mount Shu is used to being arrogant and will take the risk out of desperation. Lin Feng thought to himself, Little Lin and Little Qing are alone outside now. Perhaps they will become the targets of Mount Shu sword sect's revenge. In fact, purposely placing Wang Lin and Yang Qing outside and making them the target of the enemy's attack, then Lin Feng would make preparations in advance and make arrangements. That would be the most advantageous choice. It was very likely that he would launch a beautiful ambush and lure out the hidden enemies and kill them. However, Lin Feng did not intend to do so. After thinking for a while, he decided to summon Wang Lin and Yang Qing back to the mountain. As for Wang Lin's parents, Lin Feng also prepared to give special permission to Wang Lin to bring them back to the mountain. The same situation also applied to the Shao family in Wuzhou City. If Shao Yan had people he could not let go of, he could also bring them back to the mountain. When the time came, it would be fine to settle them in their own cave abode. Although the Great Qin dynasty had sent people to watch over them in the dark, under the situation where Mount Shu and Xianmen Tianzong were at odds, they most likely would not make such a strong enemy like the Great Qin dynasty. However, it was hard to guarantee that there would be people who only seek temporary pleasure. Lin Feng was not interested in taking the risk. Thinking to this point, Lin Feng touched the space between his eyebrows. bright flames rushed out and landed in front of him, turning into the image of a giant. It was the flame dragon heavenly armor. Under the control of Lin Feng's will, the flame dragon heavenly armor separated. The war god clone flew out from within and reappeared in the world. The violent blood energy was like the scorching sun across the sky, making one's heart palpitate. The war god clone was created by the system. Its cultivation level was automatically raised to the same level as Lin Feng himself. The degree of closeness could be said to have surpassed that of the clone. It was like Lin Feng's second self. At this moment, the strength of the war god clone had already reached the peak of the first-tier primordial soul adept. Among the adepts of the same tier that Lin Feng had seen, perhaps only Zhu Hongwu, who was at the first-tier primordial soul, was qualified to exchange blows with the war god clone. Like Prince Suoxian and Prince Yuxian of the northern militant faction, they were completely no match for the war god clone. Now, the war god clone could even fight against a second-tier primordial soul adept. As for the Iron Tree clone, it was still at the early yuanying stage. It still needed to continue cultivating. Now that Lin Feng had attained the primordial soul stage, it was no longer difficult for him to refine the flame dragon heavenly armor. Hence, there was no need for the war god clone to continue staying in the flame dragon heavenly armor. After the war god clone came out, Lin Feng's main body drew a line with his hand and tore open a crack in the void. The war god clone traversed the endless space and headed towards Wang Lin's hometown, the southern border of the Great Qin dynasty. Although martial adepts had strong battle strength, because they did not abandon their physical bodies, they were much slower than primordial soul incarnations in long-distance travel. Although they were faster in short-distance sprints and could also tear open space to escape, they were much slower than primordial soul incarnations. There were pros and cons. Lin Feng's main body used his dermic powers to send the war god clone on a journey so that it could reach its destination as soon as possible. Lin Feng's main body tore open the void and flew. When he felt that he was about to reach his destination, he suddenly felt a severe distortion in the space. Lin Feng frowned and said, "This feeling, is it because the space barrier of the Divine Land is broken and connected to the void battlefield?" The void battlefield was a strange space that hung alone in the sky. It was vast and filled with turbulent space currents and void storms. It was extremely dangerous. Cultivators below the golden elixir period would definitely die if they entered. Even cultivators in the golden elixir period would have a slim chance of survival. Normally, only cultivators in the yuanying and primordial soul stages would enter, but it was also very dangerous. Just the number of primordial soul stage experts who had died in the void battlefield was unknown. Lin Feng tore open the space and arrived at Wang Lin's hometown. As soon as he arrived, he immediately saw a huge hole in the sky that was constantly twisting, as if it was a black hole that was going to devour everything. However, the boundless world of the Divine Land was constantly repairing and stabilizing itself. The hole in the space barrier was gradually mended and became smaller and smaller. It wouldn't take long before it disappeared. Lin Feng scanned with his divine sense and his face instantly turned ugly. This was because he realized that he couldn't feel the spiritual power aura of Wang Lin and Yang Qing. Not only their own spiritual power aura, but even the space talisman that Lin Feng left for them couldn't be felt. There were only two possibilities for such a situation to occur. One was that an expert with a higher cultivation than Lin Feng had used a great magical power to cut off the connection between Lin Feng and them. The other possibility was that Wang Lin and Yang Qing had entered the void battlefield. Lin Feng took a deep breath and reminded himself to stay calm. Previously, he thought that the Shi clan's life lantern was a very good idea, so he made some himself. Wang Lin and Yang Qing's life lantern were fine. At this moment, their lives shouldn't be in danger. Looking up at the space crack in the sky, Lin Feng didn't hesitate to fly up. The closer he got to the space crack, Lin Feng suddenly felt that the spiritual power imprint that he left on Yang Qing's body was becoming clearer. Lin Feng carefully searched with his divine sense and immediately found a green light at the edge of the space crack. It was already on the other side of the void. After the space crack closed, it would most likely be left in the void battlefield. It was a Feilian light shadow. However, at this moment it was struggling to resist the huge force of the space distortion. It looked like it was on the verge of breaking. Inside the green Feilian light shadow there was a figure. It was Lin Feng's fifth disciple, Yang Qing. At this moment, he was gritting his teeth and pouring all his spiritual power into a jade talisman in his hand. He was trying to drive the Feilian light shadow to break out of the restraint of the space distortion and return to the divine land. Unfortunately, Yang Qing hadn't formed the golden elixir yet. He couldn't use the full power of this Yuanying stage magic item. He could only barely hold on. Seeing that the space crack was getting smaller and smaller and was about to close, Yang Qing's eyes were filled with despair. He looked down at the jade talisman in his hand and said, "No, I can't give up. Even if I can't go back myself, I have to send them back." Right at that moment, a silhouette suddenly appeared in front of the Feilian's silhouette. The silhouette's strength was immense, and it reached out to grab the Feilian's silhouette. Although the silhouette's hand was not large, it was powerful enough to instantly drag the Feilian's silhouette back from the other side of the rift. "Master!" Yang Qing saw the person who came and was instantly surprised. Lin Feng brought Yang Qing back to the boundless world of the divine land. After landing on the ground, Lin Feng asked in a deep voice, "Little Qing, what happened?" Yang Qing calmed down and quickly replied, "It was a late Yuanying old monster looking for trouble. Third senior brother brought me to fight with him. In the process of fighting, we accidentally opened up a void passage." "Someone from the Mount Shu sword sect?" "No." Yang Qing shook his head. Yang Qing shook her head and said, "It seemed to be a demonic cultivator. 10 days ago, a demonic cultivator from the Golden Elixir period suddenly appeared nearby. He collected tens of thousands of souls to cultivate his demonic arts and targeted Third Senior Brother's hometown. So Third Senior Brother killed him." Lin Feng nodded slightly. What happened in front of him was completely accidental. In other words, it was Wang Lin's destined son of heaven's aura that automatically attracted him. He cried and shouted and stuck to him, begging for abuse and education. In the end, behind that Golden Elixir period demonic cultivator stood a late Yuanying old monster who came to seek revenge. This person was extremely vicious and actually wanted to slaughter Third Senior Brother's entire family. He even wanted to refine all of them into Yin souls and not let them reincarnate. Hearing Yang Qing say this, Lin Feng's heart thumped. F***ck, God's cursed star? Although he teased Wang Lin for having a face like a god's cursed star, it was definitely a tragic thing for his relatives to suffer misfortune, especially his parents. Lin Feng did not want Wang Lin to experience the endless sorrow of his flesh and blood being separated and the death of his loved ones. Even if it affected Wang Lin's growth and made his path to becoming the destined son of heaven return to mediocrity, Lin Feng did not want him to really walk the path of a god's cursed star. He believed that Wang Lin himself would definitely want his parents to be safe forever. Little Lin's family. Lin Feng's eyes stared at Yang Qing. Yang Qing took out a jade slip and said, "That old monster came too fiercely. Some of Third Senior Brother's clansmen were killed. Third Senior Brother and I only had time to save his parents and some others. Phew, a great fortune in misfortune." Lin Feng let out a long breath and then looked at Yang Qing with dissatisfaction. "Brat, don't take such a big breath." Yang Qing's face was full of worry, but, in order to protect his parents, Third Senior Brother fell into the depths of the void crack with that old monster. Chapter 492. Even though Wang Lin had already formed the golden elixir, and with the help of the underworld pearl and the cloud elephant seal, he could still fight against the Yuanying stage-old monsters. However, the power of the heavenly laws embodiment of Earth in the later stages of the Yuanying stage was not something that could be compared to. If not for the fact that they had accidentally broken through the world barrier and everyone had been dragged into the void battlefield, Wang Lin and Yang Qing would not have been able to get away with it. If Yang Qing could also form the golden elixir, they might be able to protect themselves in a 2-versus-1 battle. Of course, if they did not break through the world barrier and were trapped in the void battlefield, Wang Lin and Yang Qing could immediately contact Lin Feng. Not to mention the god of war doppelganger, even the Tai Shu doppelganger could easily kill them. At this moment, Wang Lin was trapped in the depths of the crack in the void. In other words, he was already deep in the void battlefield. When it came to the dangerous places of the heaven primordial world, the void battlefield was ranked at the top. Even if a primordial spirit realm expert entered it, it would be difficult to guarantee their safety. However, the void battlefield contained many rare cultivation resources of the heaven primordial world. Among them, there was no lack of precious natural treasures. Therefore, even though there was great danger, it attracted countless experts to search for treasures. Shi Tianhao's grandfather had disappeared in the void battlefield. His parents went to search for him and left him at Shi Tianyi's house, which led to Shi Tianhao's disaster. It was even to the extent that up until now, his grandfather and parents were still lost in the void battlefield without any news from them. Fortunately, the Shi clan had left behind their life lamps, and the flames of their life lamps had never been extinguished, so it meant that they were at least safe and sound. The biggest problem of the void battlefield was that it was easy to enter but difficult to leave. Even a primordial spirit realm expert could easily get lost in the void battlefield. To come out, other than mastering the mysteries of space, one also needed a bit of luck. This was because the void turbulence was completely chaotic and disorderly. Even if it was the current Lin Feng, or the head of the Mount Shu sword sect, Xian Longxing, or the head of the Taishu temple, Yan Nanlai, they could guarantee their own safety after entering the void battlefield. But if they wanted to find someone they were separated from and bring them out, the difficulty was almost limitless. Lin Feng took the jade scroll from Yang Qing and scanned it with his consciousness. He found that there was a small space created with spiritual power that could accommodate many people. Among them, there was a middle-aged couple leaning against each other, and they were particularly eye-catching. Their facial features were at least 70% similar to Wang Lin's, and at this moment, their faces were filled with terror. This was because they had personally witnessed Wang Lin slaughtering thousands of people in an instant and then refining their souls and imprisoning them. Their eyes were filled with worry. They were worried about their son, Wang Lin and Lin. Although they had heard that their son's cultivation, they heard that Lin had a cultivation and was almost an immortal Dao Lin Feng immortal. Wang had not revealed himself. Other than Wang Lin's parents, the others had a lot more complicated feelings. Some were afraid, some were angry, and there were all kinds of emotions. It's all your Wang Lin's fault for causing such a disaster. Some couldn't hold back and shouted at Wang Lin's parents. That old immortal said that it was because Wang Lin killed his grandson that he wanted to exterminate our entire clan to avenge him. A middle-aged man beside Wang Lin's parents felt it was unfair and snorted, "You say it so easily. If not for Wang Lin and his junior brother, the demon who came at the beginning would have killed all of us. Did you forget how sixth uncle's family died? It wasn't your family that died, so how can you say such sarcastic words here?" The person at the beginning choked and felt a little embarrassed. He shouted in exasperation, "I am also sad that sixth uncle's family was killed, but what could we do? Wang Lin could have just caught that person and taught him a lesson before letting him go. But he wanted to be happy and killed that person, and now he has caused an even bigger disaster." The middle-aged man didn't give in. Wang Lin was avenging sixth uncle and the others. If I had to say, he was killed well. If we let that person go, how can we comfort sixth uncle's soul in heaven? If we let him go, that person will definitely come for revenge. At that time, more people will be killed. Maybe you will be the one who died. How can you still shout so happily now? Both sides had their supporters, and the people in the jade slips argued endlessly. When Wang Lin's parents heard people slandering their son, they were angry, but they were more worried about Wang Lin's safety. Lin Feng looked at the couple, looked at those people who stood up for Wang Lin and Yang Qing, and sighed in his heart. I wonder what their original fate would be. Wang Lin's personality was emotional, but he was also silent and introverted. The words, "Heavenly Cursed Lone Star," were practically engraved on his face. Lin Feng couldn't help but guess that Wang Lin's path to becoming the son of heaven would probably be a path that was extremely emotional but always unobtainable. Loss and gain were the main themes in his life. What he gained was what he wanted, but what he lost would probably hurt him even more. Taking back what he had lost was perhaps the strongest motivation for Wang Lin to move forward. In order to achieve this goal, he pushed himself to overcome all obstacles and finally set foot on the peak. Did I change Wang Lin's fate? Many thoughts flashed through Lin Feng's mind. If I didn't appear, what would Wang Lin's fate be now? The innate weakness of his innate talent caused Wang Lin to be destined to be ordinary at the beginning of his path of cultivation. The exquisite Tao techniques of the heavenly virtue scripture, the heaven spirit replenishing pill, the divine stone spirit platform, the mysterious heavenly treasure leaf, the heaven mending vine, the heaven connecting pill, and the mysterious heavenly time light grotto heaven to accelerate time, all of these work together, and Wang Lin's own hard work, allowing him to form the golden elixir within 100 years. Less than 3 years had passed in the outside world, and Wang Lin had returned with a golden elixir period cultivation. However, it was unknown how much hard work, resources, and time Lin Feng and his disciple had put in. If Wang Lin's original path of life was to join a small or medium-sized sect like the Hengyu sect and slowly polish himself, what kind of scene would he be 3 years later? Perhaps there was no need for that late-stage Yuanying old monster to make a move. That golden elixir period demonic cultivator who came previously would have slaughtered his clan. Or perhaps Wang Lin had offended someone outside, and they could not find him in a short time, so they came to vent their anger on his parents and clan. Then, Wang Lin's little universe would explode after receiving the news, and he would officially embark on the path of destiny. He would cultivate hard, and after achieving great success, he would find his enemy to take revenge. This was probably the original direction of the script. But now everything had changed. Even if that late-stage Yuanying old monster personally took action, Wang Lin still managed to protect his parents' clan. From an emotional point of view, this was naturally something that Lin Feng was happy to see. However, with such a huge reversal of fate, could Wang Lin still be the original Wang Lin? Could his path of being the son of heaven still continue? This time, Wang Lin's parents had escaped a calamity. In the future, would Wang Lin's fate of being the inborn lone star come into effect again? Everything had become unknown. Just like how Wang Lin had used all his strength to protect his parents, he himself had disappeared and was lost in the void battlefield. For a core formation cultivator, that place was a perilous place with only a slim chance of survival. Not to mention that there was a late nascent soul cultivator who wanted to kill him. Although the spatial turbulence was chaotic and unpredictable, most people who entered together wouldn't be too far away from each other in the beginning. Frankly speaking, Wang Lin's parents were not dead. Lin Feng was happy for Wang Lin. However, as for Wang Lin's own safety, Lin Feng was a little worried. Originally, Lin Feng was not very worried about the safety of Son of Heaven like Wang Lin and Xiao Yan. These people were people who were not afraid of getting into trouble. Son of Heaven, the template of a protagonist, if this path of life was smooth and there were fewer trials and tribulations, they would not even be able to greet others when they went out. Turning danger into safety was common. Misfortune and fortune depended on each other. The truth was that it was scary but not dangerous. A dead protagonist was not a protagonist, but a cameo, except at the end of the play. However, now that there was a slight deviation in Wang Lin's path of destiny, Lin Feng was not so confident anymore. Thinking of this, Lin Feng sighed, "Forget it, I'll just make a trip. At the same time, I can also visit Tianhao's grandfather and parent." He returned the jade scroll to Yang Qing and said indifferently, in the jade scroll, "Bring those who speak up for your third senior brother and his parents back to the mountain and settle them in Fanlinju. As for those who don't know what's good for them, just leave them in Sand Continent City. When your third senior brother comes back, let him deal with them himself." As he said this, Lin Feng broke the void and sent Yang Qing in. The main body on Jade Jing Mountain cast a spell to guide Yang Qing back to the mountain. At this moment, the space in the distance split open and two Yuanying cultivators walked out. When they saw Lin Feng, they were shocked. "Is this the master of Xianmen?" Lin Feng glanced at him. "Are you a cultivator from the Great Qin dynasty?" One of the Yuanying cultivators nodded. "I received news that there was a late-stage Yuanying demonic cultivator who sacrificed living souls to create chaos and fought with your sect's disciple here. The cultivators from the Great Qin dynasty who stayed here were also killed by this evil person. We specially rushed over to deal with it." Lin Feng nodded and looked at the crack in the barrier that was getting smaller and smaller. "My disciple Wang Lin fought with him and accidentally opened a passage to the void battlefield. The two of them went in together. You just have to reply truthfully about this matter. I also feel sorry that the cultivators of the Great Qin dynasty were killed." The two Yuanying cultivators hurriedly said that they didn't dare. This is the territory of the Great Qin dynasty. The demonic cultivator used evil methods to refine living souls and killed the people of the Great Qin dynasty. We cultivators of the Great Qin dynasty are responsible for this. Lin Feng's body flew up, flying towards the space barrier that was about to close up. "I'll leave the aftermath of this to you guys." After investigating the background of that demonic cultivator, if there are any accomplices, inform my Xian Gate Sky sect. Although his voice was calm, the hearts of the two Yuanying cultivators turned cold at the same time. They knew that Lin Feng was angry. If that old monster was a lone cultivator, it would be fine. If there was another force behind him, he would probably be in big trouble. Now, the well-informed people in the Divine Land already knew that when the master of Xianmen was angry, even a colossus like the Shu Mountain Sword sect would have to think twice and not dare to be as unbridled as before. After Lin Feng's God of War clone flew into the sky, he entered the spatial crack without hesitation and entered the void battlefield along with the void turbulence. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.